cooperation with this task force. The archives have provided these posters behind us that were allegedly produced for the CIA to show President Johnson on the days following the assassination. They are, of course, images of the Zapruder film that Americans have come to know as capturing the final moments of President Kennedy's death or life. But Americans have come to understand about the assassination of President Kennedy has mostly been controlled and filtered through the assent and watchful gaze of federal agencies who have often resisted efforts to reveal the truth. They have done this at best because of their own embarrassment about their failures to protect President Kennedy that day. At worst, they have resisted for more nefarious reasons, such as failing to acknowledge the extent of power and reach that the CIA in the 1960s had and beyond, to the point of deceiving even the United States Congress. That is why we are here today. We are here to listen to the witnesses who have waited, in some cases, decades to tell their stories. I want to be clear, the Task Force on Declassification of Federal Secrets is not here to provide the definitive account of what happened on November 22nd, 1963. Instead, the task force is meant to root out the hidden pockets of federal government that has for too long remained in the shadows of our reach, out of our reach for even good faith investigators to reach. I also want to thank President Trump for committing to the principles of transparency and holding the government accountable to the people. His executive order regarding the declassification of documents related to the assassination of President Kennedy, Senator Robert F. Kennedy, and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a step forward in the right direction. The job of the task force is to ensure that the federal agencies follow that order, because in the past, a president's order for transparency has not always been heeded by the most secretive portions of our government. The objective of this task force is not to indulge in conspiracy theories, but to push forward the release of information so these theories can be put to bed and so the American people can finally have truth. It is the federal agencies that lack transparency for 60 years that have led to the people's distrust in their government, and it's time to restore that. I would also like to provide, for those who have been closely following this, to include researchers, an update on several documents that are outstanding. To date, the Joe Needy's files has not been located. A whistleblower report from the CIA alleging the CIA's implication has also not been located. Lee Harvey Oswald's travel records have not been located. And the Diaz 201 file, who was a plausible suspect for the Delaney Plaza shooter, and then as well as the MCETA documents concerning CIA penetration of the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. Last week, for an update, I did speak to the CIA directly, not in a skiff, so I can talk about it publicly. And they did notify me that 4 of these 5 documents would be publicly released in the coming weeks, but there was one that was outstanding, and I do believe that that one outstanding document is the Joe Needy's file. Without further ado, I'd like to yield this next portion to Ranking Member Garcia. And then also, prior to that, we also had requested footage from NBC. They gave us something like 20 hours of footage, all of which was not the Wegman footage that we'd asked for. So we are kindly asking NBC to reassess their archives and produce that documentation. Without further ado, Ranking Chairman Garcia.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairwoman Luna. I want to note, first, thank you to the witnesses that are here. Now, as the task force continues its work, we need to continue to follow the facts and provide transparency for the American people. I think we can all agree that this task force was not set up to chase conspiracy theories, and I'm glad, of course, to have Chairwoman Luna reiterate that. It's responsible, though, for us to focus on declassification of historical records, and that allows, as we all know, the public to gain a better understanding of the past, can restore trust in our institutions, and ensures accountability in our shared government. Now, on March 18, 2025, the National Archives and Records released more than 77,000 pages related, of course, to the November 22nd, 1963 assassination of President Kennedy. Now, we know that many of these documents, most in fact, were already in the public record, but continued work to make the documents more accessible is important and valuable. Now, over the past several decades, our government has collected and released almost 6 million pages of documents consistent with President John F. Kennedy and the Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992. Now, together, we should push back on decades of overclassification relating not to just the JFK assassination, but a variety of subjects. We should be very clear, and it should be done in a bipartisan way, that the FBI and the CIA of the 1960s were deeply flawed institutions. And while they have taken lessons from their past trespasses, there is no question that they have continued to often overclassify information, often out of an unnecessary abundance of caution. And it's also important to note that the FBI and CIA did harm in numerous areas over the last few decades, particularly when you look at the time of the civil rights movement. Now, transparency is how we ensure accountability and trust. The American people have the right to know as much as possible about what our government does and how our tax dollars are spent in a way that doesn't, of course, interfere with national security. Now, I understand the interest in a second hearing on President Kennedy's assassination, but I hope our task force can continue to work in a bipartisan way on the many other topics under its purview that are also important to the public. Now, as we hear testimony from our witnesses today, I want to make sure that we remember that President Kennedy's assassination is more than a historical event. It was also a human tragedy. President Kennedy was a husband, a father, a brother, and a son. Revisiting and relitigating a tragic killing is also painful for the real people that were impacted and for the family. And I think it's important to uplift that. We should be respectful and responsible as we work to address the public's questions about this tragedy. And we know that President Kennedy's legacy has made America the country that it is today. Now, at a time when we're looking, of course, and the majority is pushing for tax cuts, oftentimes for the wealthiest, we need to remember that President Kennedy believed in a society where Americans took care of one another. He fought to expand and lay the groundwork for the program, which of course became Medicare, which was enacted under President Johnson. He, of course, was a huge proponent of advancing civil rights, and President Kennedy proposed the Civil Rights Act, which became a landmark law in 1964. He supported the courts and the rule of law, which we know that President Kennedy worked tirelessly to enforce, of course, courts, support courts, and orders, even sending U.S. Marshals and the National Guard to desegregate the University of Mississippi. Social Security was also critical to President Kennedy. He worked to expand Social Security to increase benefits and cover more people with disabilities. President Kennedy, over and over again, of course, believed that government could do big things. He invested in scientific discovery and challenged us to put a man on the moon. We know, and he knew, that our country was strongest as a global leader fighting for freedom and democracy. He believed in working through our alliances. And I want to make sure that the family also knows that we will work and always work to uplift President Kennedy's legacy and what he left for this country and his community. It's important that we follow the facts and that we work to continue and declassify oftentimes things that have been overclassified by particularly the FBI and the CIA in the past. And thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Chairman Garcia. And if it's okay with the chairman, I'd like to allow our witnesses to give more detail in the testimony, so if they go over the 5 minutes. How it works typically is with the opening statements, you're usually allotted a certain amount of time, but given the nature and context of this hearing, take your time. No one's in trouble. We want to hear your story for historical purposes and significance. So just take your time. You're not under any pressure. Our witnesses here today are pretty historical. Joining us via Zoom, we actually have Mr. Abraham Bolden. Mr. Bolden was an agent with the U.S. Secret Service appointed by President Kennedy in 1961. And sir, we want to thank you very much for attending today. We are very happy that you are here. We also have Dr. Dawn Curtis. Dr. Curtis was a resident in oral and facial surgery at Parkland Hospital in Dallas. And at 12:45 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, he was actually in the trauma room 1 attempting to save President Kennedy's life. He is joining us today in person. Dr. Judge Tunheim, Mr. Tunheim is currently a federal district judge in Minnesota, but previously served as President Bill Clinton's chair of the Assassinations Record Review Board, as well as Mr. Hardway. Mr. Hardway was an investigator with the Select Committee on Assassinations of the House of Representatives, as well as Mr. Douglas Horn. Mr. Horn was a staff at the Assassination Record Review Board, and then as well as Miss Alexis Koo. Ms. Koo is a presidential historian and senior fellow at New America. Pursuant to the Committee on Oversight and Government Reform Rule 9, the witnesses will please stand and raise your right hand. Sir, Dr. Curtis, you can sit, but please raise your right hand, sir. Do you so solemnly swear and affirm that the testimony that you are about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. Let the record show that the witnesses have answered in the affirmative. The task force certainly appreciates you for being here today, and we look forward to hearing your testimony. Let me remind you and the witnesses that we have read your written statements and that they will appear in record in full. And as an accommodation, because of the historic nature of this testimony, please also be ensured that you will not be rushed for your opening statements, but try to keep it around 10 minutes if possible. As a reminder, please press the button on the microphone in front of you so that it is on and the members can hear you. When you begin to speak, the light in front of you will turn green. After 9 minutes, the light may turn yellow. And when the red light comes on, that means your time is up, but we will not be gaveling you out. So please take your time. I now recognize Mr. Bolden to give an opening statement. Sir, we can't hear you. Is your microphone on? We still can't hear him. Okay, we are going to move to Dr. Curtis while you guys work through the mic issue, but Mr. Bolden, please be assured we will be coming back to you. So we'll just pass. We will be coming back though. Dr. Curtis, if you can.
Thank you. My story begins when I left my office to go to get something to eat before I did surgery. And to do that, I had to go by the emergency room. And when I went by the emergency room, a policeman came out of the door into the emergency room, grabbed my shoulder, and he said, "Are you a doctor?" Can everybody hear?
Yes, sorry, Dr. Curtis. Mr. Bolden, we can hear you now. Your microphone's working, but Dr. Curtis is doing their opening statement. So if you could just pause real quick and then put yourself on mute. Thank you. Dr. Curtis, please continue.
All right. So the policeman asked me if I was a doctor, and I said yes. And he grabbed me by the arm and pulled me into the emergency room and took me to the trauma room. And when I looked in the trauma room, there was 3 people in the room. One was the president, and he was laying on the gurney, and an extremist. And the other was Dr. Carrico, James Carrico, and one nurse. And the reason Dr. Carrico was on his own is because the Governor Conley was brought in before him, and he was very seriously ill, and the staff, all the staff in the emergency room went to help him, and then Dr. Carrico was left to take care of the president by himself. So I walked in, and he had just placed a endotracheal tube, and then I walked up and held the tube so he could connect the bird machine to it. The bird machine is an intermittent positive pressure respiratory help, and it works by filling the lungs and then letting the air come back out. And the way it works is that the inspiration continues to a certain pressure, and then the expiration continues to another low pressure, and therefore that spaces the breathing. Normally, that's about 10 or 15 minutes, 10 or 15 times during a minute, but in this case, it was going about 100 to 125 minute conversions in a minute. So it was rat-a-tat-tat-tat, and I knew the machine. Dr. Carrico knew the machine. We used it a lot, and so the question was, is the machine not working, or is there tube blocked or what? And he had placed the tube in. And if you place an endotracheal tube, you place it between the cords, and then you know you're in the trachea and you've got an airway. But in this case, apparently we didn't have an airway. And finally, it was a question, is it the machine or what is it? And so finally it got to a point where I said, "Jimmy, what do you want to do?" And he had already made a decision. He said, "Tracheostomy, we need to do a trach." So if there was going to be a trach, well, I knew the shirt would be in the way. So I moved around to take the shirt off, and the nurse was way ahead of me with her scissors. We took the shirt off. And in the meantime, Dr. Malcolm Perry came in, and he was on the medical staff. He's a professor in the medical school, senior to Dr. Carrico. So he decided to do the tracheostomy. And then Dr. Carrico said to me, "Don, why don't you go ahead and do a cut down on that left leg?" And so I went and did that. A cut down is a very small operation, but is a very important thing to do. reason for doing it is that most people come in to the emergency room as be bled out, where their blood volume is low. And if the blood volume is low, well, then the heart doesn't have anything to pump, and that is a cause of death. Well, if you can replenish the blood volume quickly, well, then that causes a better chance of survival. So the cut down is to put a catheter in a vein so that you can get the fluid in faster. And the operation is to make an incision across the front of the shin and dissect out the saphenous vein, which is a large vein that goes right up the front of the leg. Put a catheter, make a little hole in the catheter, put the catheter in there, and then put a stitch around the vein to close it off and hold the catheter in place. The nurse at the meantime has the bag hanging with IV fluid in 500 cc's in a collar that she can pump up. And when she does that, well, she it forces the fluid into the vein. And so that's what I did. Then after I did that, then Dr. Perry had already completed the tracheostomy, and I was looked up, and then the president heart had stopped or it wasn't running. They put a monitor on the president, found out his heart was not bleeding, and so so external cardiac massage was being done by Kemp Clark, the chief of neurosurgery, and somebody relieved him, and Kemp Clark went and picked up the head and stopped the resuscitation. This wound is not compatible with life. You got dead quiet. Nobody knew what to say. Nobody said anything for the longest time. Then he said, okay. And he looked at, by that time, the chiefs of all the surgical services were against the wall across the room from me, and all in white coats, and they had responded to the call that they needed help. And so he said, pointed them out, I need to tell each of you individually what the wound is, so that you can say that later on. And then he described the wound as about a 3 or 4 inch hole in the posterior cranium. And then there's a bullet hole in the right temple. So he described it that the bullet came through the temple into the cranial vault, created a huge pressure in the cranial vault. And when the bullet finally tumbled into the posterior wall, it blew it out. And he explained all that individually to these 7 doctors. And those doctors knew what was happening and what happened to the president and the wound that killed him. And they never were called by the Warren Commission. So that didn't work. And so after that, I stood there and I couldn't leave because Mrs. Kennedy was to my right and I couldn't get past her. So I had to just stay there for a while. But then eventually everybody left. And I went around to look at the wound, and I couldn't see it was laying on the pillow, but I could see where it was. Then I left there and went into an adjacent room. The X-ray waiting room was a large room. And right in the middle of the room was Lyndon Johnson. And he was telling people to go talk on the phone. And he was, obviously, he'd set the government up and he had taken control. And then I looked around and I couldn't see a single person that I thought looked like Secret Service. I couldn't see any weapons that were protecting him. And so I was a little uncomfortable being there myself, because at that time we had no idea what was going on in our government. We didn't know if the government would be intact or not. But it made me feel good to know that he was right in the middle of the room and he was the president. He was absolutely fearless. Then I wondered, why is he so absolutely fearless? I mean, because if it was a coup, he'd be the next one to go. So with that, I left, and that's what I learned in the trauma room. Then later, found out that the residents and interns should not talk to each other about this. And so we didn't. And Dr. Carrico and I would have lunch together many times, often just him and me. And we never mentioned it to each other. And so one thing I'd like to get started today is that the magic bullet was a product of the Warren Commission that doesn't make any sense. And I can go through these bullets that fell on the, but I think I'm out of town.
Well, so just so you know, we will be giving you opportunity to go back to that because we are very interested in that,
Okay.
and thank you for that. Because of previous technical issues, Mr. Bolden, if you can please give your opening statement.
Chairman Luna and other distinguished members of the committee. And I was the only agent there to take control of the situation. President Johnson, the first thing that he said as he passed. Distinguished every word that they said. But when Johnson left the Oval Office, he first wanted to know who I was, and I know who I was to know. But she
Mr. Bolden, if you can for a moment, we actually have some questions in regards to your testimony. So is it okay if we move to some of the other witnesses for opening and then come back to you with specifics on your experience? And also to both the ranking member, Mr. Garcia, and I would like to thank you for your service to this country, especially as the first African-American Secret Service officer. Your sacrifice for this country and your service to this country does not go unnoticed, so we applaud you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Now, I would like to recognize Mr. Hardway for an opening statement.
Thank you. For the past 62 years, the Central Intelligence Agency has actively and continuously obstructed the investigation of the assassination of President John F. Kennedy with no consequences for their actions. 10 years ago, the CIA's official historian admitted that the CIA had hid information from the Warren Commission during its investigation. The CIA stonewalled the Senate Select Committee to study governmental operations with respect to intelligence activities, the Church Committee. The CIA was not forthcoming with the Rockefeller Commission. The CIA misled and slow-walked the Assassination Records Review Board. James Angleton's preferred method in dealing with the Warren Commission was to, quote, wait them out. The first CIA officer I ever interviewed looked at me and said, "You represent Congress. What the F is that to the CIA? You'll be gone in 2 years, and we'll still be here." In 1978, the CIA ran an illegal domestic covert operation involving an undercover officer to subvert and obstruct the House Select Committee on Assassinations. That officer served undercover. That terminology is the terminology the CIA used to describe his assignment working with the Select Committee in a statement that their representative made under penalties of perjury in a lawsuit in 2005. I personally experienced the CIA's obstruction of the HSC investigation and can testify firsthand about what happened. In 1977 and 1978, I was employed as a researcher by the Select Committee, and I have submitted a detailed 17-page description of what happened then and since then, which I hope you will read. Briefly, my primary area of responsibility was Lee Harvey Oswald's activities in Mexico City in the fall of 1963 and the performance of the CIA in monitoring and reporting those activities, as well as other issues related to the possibility of CIA knowledge of or involvement in the assassination of President Kennedy and the cover-up of information relevant to the investigation of the assassination. In that capacity, I had a top-secret security clearance and, during the major portion of my employment, had access to unredacted CIA records requested for review from the CIA by the Select Committee. Implicit in the focus of my work was the issue of whether the evidence from Mexico indicated any operational connection between Oswald and the CIA. Ed Lopez and I authored the report, The CIA, Oswald, and Mexico City. In the spring of 1978, among other things, I was looking hard into back-channel communications methods used by the Mexico City station, the use of an impulse camera to photograph the Cuban consulate in Mexico City, missing production from that impulse camera and from one of the photographic installations that covered the Soviet embassy in Mexico City, and David Atlee Phillips' anti-Castro propaganda operations, including his connections to stories about Oswald that rapidly appeared after the assassination of John Kennedy. In May of 1978, the CIA assigned an officer working in an undercover capacity to work with me and Mr. Lopez. That man was George Joannides. When Joannides was introduced to the investigation, we were told that he had no connection of any kind with any aspect of the Kennedy case that we would be investigating. In addition to that, the CIA assured us that they had no working relationship with an anti-Castro Cuban group known as DRE. They had no relationship with the DRE when representatives of that group had an encounter with Oswald in the summer of 1963, which they turned into quite a propaganda coup. The DRE was responsible for the first ever conspiracy theory about the assassination when the day after the assassination, they published in their newspaper the story about Oswald's pro-Castro activities in New Orleans and proposed that Castro was behind the assassination, a story that was picked up the next day by the Washington Post and the Miami Herald. Thanks to the work of the Assassination Records Review Board, though, we now know that not only was DRE still a CIA operation all the way through 1963 and all the way up to April 1964, its controlling case officer, who oversaw the activities of the DRE and directed the DRE's activities, was no one other than George Joannides. I believe we were close to some major discoveries in 1978. And then the CIA ran an undercover operation against us. They assigned us a man who knew exactly how to keep us from finding what we were looking for. And he proceeded to do just that. Reasonable inferences may be drawn about what they did not want us to find from the substantial circumstantial evidence that has come to light by our efforts and those of the Assassination Records Review Board and the journalist Jefferson Morley. I am a witness to these events. As such, I have a civic duty to testify. I wish I were just here. Actually, I wish I weren't here. But I wish I were just here to talk about a cover-up. But I'm not. I'm here to talk about a CIA covert operation directed against the Select Committee on Assassinations that was illegal and a violation of the CIA's charter, as well as being a felonious obstruction of a congressional investigation. That operation was and continues to be successful. Despite our testimony, and by that I mean mine, Ed Lopez's, and G. Robert Blakey's, and the clear record No one has ever done anything about it. I have copies of the sworn testimony and exhibits of all three of us in DC District Court case number 17 CV 1433. I have those records with me if any of the members of this task force would like to see them. The question for this task force is whether anyone in this new generation of leaders has the backbone, the courage, the gumption to try to do something even at this late date. It's easy to admit and air the sins of our ancestors. It is much harder to admit that we build their tombs and endorse their actions by our inaction. I'm here to testify again, which is all that I can do. What will you do?
Thank you, Mr. Hardaway. I now recognize Judge Tunheim for an opening statement.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Ranking Member. Appreciate this opportunity to speak today. My name is John Tunheim. I'm a federal district court judge for the District of Minnesota. I'm in my 30th year as a federal judge. I served as chief judge of our district from 2015 until 2022, and as a member of the U.S. Judicial Conference from 2020 to 2024. I was originally nominated by President Clinton in 1995 after serving 10 years as the Minnesota's Chief Deputy Attorney General. I was chair of the Assassination Records Review Board during its entire existence from 1994 through 1998. The Review Board was an independent federal agency. Its 5 board members were confirmed by the U.S. Senate after being nominated by President Clinton. Congress created the Review Board for the express purpose of reviewing all of the still secret records of the tragic assassination of President John Kennedy and declassifying as much information as could be publicly released. The impetus for the law, which was enacted in October 1992, was Oliver Stone's movie JFK. The President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Collection Act of 1992 provided for a 5-member decision-making board which would make decisions on agency-requested redactions from classified documents. We had declassification authority. The first time and maybe the only time an outside group had that authority. The board members were by law to be recommended for appointment by professional organizations, 2 National Historical Associations, an Archivists Association, and the American Bar Association. Besides me, the members included a renowned provost from a major university, later university president, 2 distinguished history professors, and a senior archivist at Princeton. We were confirmed in 1994 and began our work with no appropriation or offices. We worked out of the National Archives for a time until I was able to secure some funding from the White House to get us started before Congress could provide an appropriation. The agency's presentation of records was seriously delayed because of the delay in the appointments. We were ready to begin review with our staff by early 1995. The statute did not require us to reach any conclusions about prior investigations or what happened on November 22nd. Rather, our task was to conduct a wide-ranging search for records to create the largest possible collection of assassination-related records as open to the public as possible. The goal was to allow the interested public to make up their own minds about what happened and based on an open and transparent and complete record. The congressional mandate, and this is important, it stated that the records relating to the assassination would, quote, carry a presumption of immediate disclosure. And, quote, only in the rarest of cases is there any legitimate need for continued protection. This is Congress in 1992. Congress defined the term assassination records broadly and indicated that the review board could further define the term assassination record, which we did. So in June of 1995, our definition was that any record that was reasonably related to the assassination would be an assassination record subject to the board's jurisdiction. and we included all records collected by government agencies in conjunction with any investigation or analysis of or inquiry into the assassination of President Kennedy. We developed detailed guidelines for agencies to follow, and agencies did have the right to appeal our decisions directly to the president. We were authorized to redact words. We did not ever redact entire documents. That the agency proved by clear and convincing evidence, that was a standard, that the harm of disclosure outweighed the public interest in the document in 4 categories: national security, intelligence gathering methods, personal privacy, or methods of protecting the president. That was it. We held many public hearings, experts conferences around the country, in addition to our private meetings to discuss our decision-making. We also tried to clarify unclear evidence where we could, digitalizing autopsy materials and analyzing them, and deposing the autopsy physicians. We also gathered artifacts, including photographs and film, clothing, and other artifacts. We had limited time to do our work, which was not enough time. We were granted just 1 more year by Congress, so we had a total of 3 years. We began to lose staff as we approached the end of our mandate. In all, the board issued over 27,000 individual rulings. These were decisions on requests by agencies to protect information. Most redacted information had release dates attached to them. We made it easy for the researchers to determine whether a redacted name appeared in different locations so that they would know it was the same person. There were a further 33,000 consent releases, which essentially means that the agency saw the handwriting on the wall and released the documents directly, since we were likely to order release. When we finished, there were nearly 5 million pages at the National Archives. We made the decision early that we would not protect any information directly related to the assassination because of the high level of public interest. By 2017, when the last records were to be released under the Act, there were probably not more than 1,500 review board redactions that were remaining. The Act was clear in stating that despite the review board wrapping up its work in 1998, the Act was to continue in effect, which meant that agencies had the obligation to continue to present information. Most of the redactions now in the documents are within documents never shown to the review board, but were transferred to NARA at a later time. Agencies largely complied with the mandate to present records to the review board. However, there were many delays and denials with records that we specifically requested, and there were many skirmishes along the way. It does not take a rocket scientist to realize that agencies were awaiting the end of our 3-year mandate. The first 500 or so adverse disclosure decisions we made in FBI records were appealed to the president, and the appeals were dropped when White House counsel, former judge, and Representative Abner Mikva told the FBI to drop the appeals because President Clinton would deny all of them. FBI staff was helpful to us, but I'm now seeing records in the new releases that were not disclosed to the review board. The CIA was cooperative and processed many documents with us, but we never received much of what we specifically asked for. When asked, for example, for documents involving James Angleton that we had not seen, I was told the documents were no longer maintained as a collection. We received only 3 memoranda that incorporated the agency's review of Angleton's counterintelligence files, not the files themselves, just a review by someone else of the files. We were told that all the other documents had been destroyed. I'm now seeing a flood of documents that clearly meet the definition of assassination records involving Angleton and others that were not submitted to us for review. When CIA analysts would not tell us the details of their secret operations, our response was, okay, we'll release the record in 10 days. We then heard the details and could make a reasonable decision. We had in our hands a small file on George Ioannidis that disclosed nothing really, so it was returned. We didn't know the details of his work at the time. We now know much more about Joanides, and his files should be immediately disclosed. There's no reason anymore for protecting those files. Clearly, we were misled. I actually wrote to President Biden asking that he order the CIA to release the Joanides file, and I never received a response. The Secret Service was very difficult. They were the only agency that we were aware of that tried to reclassify assassination records after we were in office. They attempted to classify documents that had already been released publicly and fought us over 1963 threat sheets that was still in process when we left office. The Department of State was less than helpful, although they released records in their possession. When we negotiated with Russian officials over the Oswald files in Moscow, they did not lift a finger to help us, not even allowing us access to the United States Embassy. When we tried to get access to Belarusian records on Oswald, they did not help. When we planned meetings with Mexican and Cuban officials, they stopped us from direct contacts. The act specifically required the Department of State to help us find foreign records. The National Archives was very helpful to us when we did our work. A very dedicated staff member, Stephen Tilley, was instrumental in getting our work done. But since we left office, I've been disappointed the Archives has not devoted more personnel to the records. We had planned that the Archives would continue our work to the extent possible. For the most part, that has not happened, and the agency has never been in contact with me. So there are other files that should be released. We came close to an agreement to copy the entire KGB file on Lee Harvey Oswald that is maintained in Minsk, Belarus. Last-minute disputes prevented the agreement from moving forward. Copies of the files are in Moscow. I just have a little bit more here. We were particularly interested in the files of Walter Sheridan, an investigator for Robert Kennedy. When we took office, he removed the files from the Kennedy Library where we had access to them and gave them to NBC for safekeeping. I don't think those files have been released. The William Manchester taped interviews of Jacqueline and Robert Kennedy are protected by a 1967 legal agreement, now controlled by Caroline Kennedy. We encouraged her to release the files, and she finally responded in August 1998 that she would not agree to their release or even let us listen to the recordings. And out there somewhere are files on Jack Ruby. We could not find them other than the files maintained by the earlier investigations. And the final report of the board, a copy of which I will give to Madam Chair today, we made 10 recommendations that are relevant today still. I won't go through them all, but they deal with the problems of excessive government secrecy, which has plagued the public's understanding of the Kennedy assassination for decades. We strongly endorsed the method selected for independent declassification of executive branch records that was used in our case, but also detailed the problems inherent in the review board's legislation. Most important, to deal with massive overclassification, we recommended a federal classification policy be developed that substantially, 1, limits the number of those in government who can actually classify federal documents. 2, restricts the number of categories by which documents might be classified. 3, reduces the time period for which documents might be classified. 4, encourages the use of substitute language to immediately open material that might otherwise be classified. And 5, increases the resources available to agencies and NARA for declassifying federal records. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. And just so everyone knows, we are going to be following up on getting that file, the KGB file in Minsk. I'm interested in seeing that. And I think that with peace talks right now, it might be prime time for that. So we will be following up on that.
It stands about 5 feet high. It's a lot of records.
Well, we might have to bring you back out of retirement, what you're currently doing, and have you help go through it with that. I'd like to now recognize Mr. Horn for an opening statement.
Chairwoman Luna, Ranking Member Garcia, and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to appear and testify today. I served on the staff of the President John F. Kennedy Assassination Records Review Board for the final 3 years of its 4-year lifespan, from August of 1995 through September of 1998. I was hired as a senior analyst on the military records team and was promoted early in 1997 to head the military records team, serving as chief analyst for military records until the ARRB shut down on September 30th, 1998. During my time on the staff, in addition to securing the declassification and public release of military records related to Cuba and Vietnam policy, I was privileged to work extensively in the medical evidence arena and to serve as the review board's point man on issues related to the Zapruder film of President Kennedy's assassination. Although the review board was not empowered to reinvestigate the assassination or generate conclusions or findings of fact, the board did choose to attempt to clarify the record of certain aspects of the assassination by taking the depositions of 10 persons who participated in or who were present at the autopsy on President John F. Kennedy, and by later taking one additional joint deposition of 5 of the Dallas treating physicians. I served as the principal research assistant to the review board's general counsel, Jeremy Gunn, in preparing for and conducting our 10 depositions of the participants and witnesses to JFK's autopsy, and was present at all 10 of those depositions. The sworn testimony of our 10 deponents, as well as numerous written interview reports of additional unsworn medical witnesses, were all deposited in the National Archives in the JFK Records Collection without comment or endorsement. In subsequent years, I wrote a 5-volume memoir about my own personal conclusions regarding the medical evidence and explained the substantial ways in which the work of the ARRB staff significantly enhanced the totality of the medical evidence and our understanding of how President Kennedy was killed. Some outstanding questions were resolved, but many other questions were raised by the information we gathered, questions that remain unresolved today. And this is the heart of my oral testimony here. Many Americans remain troubled today by the many conflicts within the JFK medical evidence and what they might mean, and they remain unsatisfied with the official conclusions offered up by both the Warren Commission in 1964 and the HSCA Forensic Pathology Panel in 1979. Based on my work as an analyst at the ARRB and as an independent researcher, I have concluded that there are ample reasons for the disquiet of so many of the American people, to wit, first, 8 different sets of photographs known with confidence to have been taken during the autopsy on JFK are not in the official collection today and never have been. Some autopsy photos in the official collection at the National Archives are in gross disagreement with the head and neck wounds universally observed on November 22nd, 1963 by the treating physicians at Parkland Hospital, which they recorded in precise detail in their treatment notes that day and in their subsequent 1964 testimony. At least 2 and possibly 3 JFK skull x-rays exposed at Bethesda Naval Hospital are missing today and have never been in the official collection. The science of optical densitometry reveals that all 3 surviving skull x-rays are not originals, but rather are altered copy films. 2 highly qualified and respected MDs who were granted repeated access by the Kennedy family to the autopsy photographs and x-rays in the deed of gift collection at the archives both agree that the extant JFK skull x-rays reveal unambiguous and clear evidence of 2 headshots fired from in front of the president, contrary to the findings of the Warren Commission and the HSCA. The JFK skull x-rays actually reveal a total of 3 headshots, 1 from behind and 2 from the front. The so-called Harper fragment of skull bone, a crucial item of evidence signed for by the president's military physician and photographed and x-rayed by the FBI, has been missing since late in 1963. Many bullet fragments known to have been removed from President Kennedy's body at Bethesda Naval Hospital were never placed into the official record and are missing today. The remains of President Kennedy's brain following its examination were placed in a stainless steel container in 1963, but the brain is missing today, as many people know already. That stainless steel container and an original signed autopsy report were among materials transferred from the Secret Service to Senator Robert F. Kennedy in April of 1965. Those materials and others were not among the materials returned to the U.S. government by RFK on October 31st, 1966, via a deed of gift to the National Archives. The Kennedy family attorney, Burke Marshall, told the HSCA that Robert F. Kennedy had made those materials permanently inaccessible without providing details. The 14 brain photographs in the National Archives today cannot be and are not photographs of John F. Kennedy's brain. They have been impugned by the official photographer at the brain examination and by one of the FBI agents present at JFK's autopsy. The chain of custody of President Kennedy's body prior to the start of the autopsy, shortly after 8 p.m. on November 22nd, 1963, clearly appears to have been broken, casting even more doubt upon the reliability of the official autopsy report. And finally, Navy pathologists arrived at 4 sets of differing conclusions about President Kennedy's wounds and how he died within the 2 weeks after his death. The official autopsy report that is now in the National Archives represents only the 4th and final set of conclusions. This fact, perhaps more than any of the others above, is patently unacceptable in the nation that prides itself as the world's greatest democracy. Moving on to a new subject. The existing deed of gift, dated October 29th, 1966, that sets severe restrictions upon who can view the JFK autopsy materials and how they can be used, needs to be re-examined and lifted. It has resulted in de facto suppression of these materials. Only by having free and unlimited access to the autopsy photographs and skull x-rays can troubling and persistent questions about their authenticity be definitively and finally resolved by qualified experts. In my concluding paragraph, I wish to make a short statement about the Zapruder film of the assassination. Studies in Hollywood of the individual film frames, that is state-of-the-art digital scans of extremely high resolution, appear to show the use of visual effects, that is animation or artwork, to crudely and blatantly alter the image content in some key frames. To state the problem simply, the digitized Zapruder film, studied by professionals in Hollywood, does not show the massive exit wound in the rear of the head seen at Parkland Hospital and by many witnesses at Bethesda during the autopsy, because it has been blacked out. And yet the film does appear to show head wounds not seen at Parkland Hospital. We now know that rather than spending the entire weekend following the assassination in Chicago at the Life printing plant, as was originally claimed, the Zapruder film actually spent most of the weekend in the custody of the CIA in Washington, D.C., and at Kodak's main research and development laboratory in Rochester, New York. The attitude of one National Archives official, expressed in writing circa 2009, was that they, quote, do not ever intend to take the film out of the freezer again, end quote. This decision should be overturned, and the so-called purported original film should be made available for appropriate inspection by qualified film professionals from the motion picture industry and academia, and by that I mean film schools, so that questions of authenticity can be definitively resolved. I've provided many additional details in my written testimony, and I request that they be included in the congressional record. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Horn, and they will. Ms. Coe, if you can please provide opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ranking Member Garcia. It's an honor to address the committee today. Historians are time travelers. I was just in 1947 when John F. Kennedy began his first term in the House. And now I find myself here speaking to people who sit where he once sat, doing the kind of work he once did. During JFK's 11 years in Congress, he questioned everything, not to impress, but to understand. And he listened. He changed. And that took courage. Not the kind that earned him a Purple Heart in World War II. Political courage is slower, it's quieter, and it has the power to reshape a country. His public service deepened from there. He wrote a Pulitzer Prize-winning book, established the Peace Corps. He governed in the crucible of the Cold War, civil rights, and the space race. He made mistakes, and he learned from them. The Bay of Pigs taught him restraint, the value of failure, the strength in stepping back, and Americans noticed. By 1963, his approval rating peaked at 82%. None of that was inevitable. He chose discipline over drama, substance over show. And don't get me wrong, Jack Kennedy understood the power of media. He courted the press, he worked the spotlight, he shaped the moment, but only after he had done the work, after he'd earned it. And that's why his name endures as a standard of greatness. The JFK Library's Profiles in Courage Award carries that legacy forward. It's honored George H.W. Bush, the heroes of 9/11, and just last month, Mike Pence, for what history always notices, putting country first when it matters most. Of course, JFK wasn't perfect. I've never studied a saint, and I haven't met one either. I see history's bold-faced names on their best days and on their worst. But complexity isn't a liability unless you're cherry-picking with an agenda. Which brings me to today's hearing. The title uses charged words: obstruction, obfuscation, deception. But in the 132 days since the JFK assassination records were released, not even conspiracy theorists can claim that it upended the Warren Commission. There is something unprecedented in these files. That is true. Unredacted Social Security numbers and private information of living Americans. I've never seen anything like it. And given that most quality control has been fired, like the State Department's Historical Advisory Committee, I'm afraid it will become the new normal. But as far as the files, no hidden truths, no real disclosures, no shocking revelations. This wasn't history disrupted, it was history remastered. A 60th anniversary re-release with better resolution, the same ending. And surely this resonates with a Congress that vigilantly protects its own records. You've preserved the right to classify your office's documents as private property. They will never be public if you don't want them to. I hope we can talk about public trust today and what happens and how this appears to fit into a larger pattern. The Kennedy Center is no longer bipartisan. The Rose Garden has been stripped of its historic character. U.S. aid was gutted. Taken together, it's hard not to see this as an attempt to reduce a consequential leader to a grotesque spectacle. His legacy defined by how he died and not what he did. On November 22nd, 1963, America lost John F. Kennedy, and with him, a sense of possibility. That's how I think of the archives too. They are crammed with untold stories, ones we truly do not know about. What an opportunity for the president, by default, our historian-in-chief, and by great good luck, in office as America approaches its 250th anniversary. But instead, tragedy begets tragedy. In 1953, JFK entered the Senate. A year later, his colleagues censured Joseph McCarthy. Kennedy rose as McCarthy fell. a reminder that Americans tire of reckless spectacle, division, demagogues. They seek substance, accountability, an authentic commitment to the public good. I began by saying that historians are time travelers. We study the past to understand the present. And these records make me wonder how this moment will be remembered. When future historians ask whether we met it with the courage it demanded, how will they answer? JFK understood how much depends on that. And the real question is, do we? Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to now recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Biggs, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the witnesses and the panel for being here today. So I have questions, I think, for most of you, and I need a quick response if I can, but for me first, I will ask ultimately of all of you the question, why? Why did this move the way it did? So Dr. Curtis, you observed the back of President Kennedy's head. You saw an exit wound. And you said that didn't align with the theory that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in shooting President Kennedy. Is that fair to say?
I wish I could hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll speak up.
All right.
I'll try to be louder. You indicated that you had no doubt that the wound that you observed to the back of President Kennedy's head was an exit gunshot wound. Is that fair?
Yes.
And you concluded after review that it did not align, his wound did not align with the theory that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone in shooting President Kennedy. Is that true?
Yes.
And I guess you struggle to this day to understand the Warren Commission's theory about the president shooter and how it seems to have discord with what you actually observed that day. Is that fair to say?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Hardway. So you have indicated that you essentially were the subject of a covert operation as you served on the House Select Committee on Assassinations. Is that fair to say?
The CIA called it a covert assignment.
And that was from, and I can't get Mr. Joanides?
Joanides, yes.
Joanides. And you've called on the release of Mr. Joanides' file to the public. Is that fair to say?
That's fair.
And so I would actually echo that call to the chair that we see if we can get Mr. Joanides' file released. And I'd like to continue on this. I only have 2.5 minutes, but I have to get to the ultimate question. Why? Why did the CIA intervene with Mr. Hardway's review? Why were documents altered? Why was the Zapruder film removed and not brought back in its original documented form? Why? And so I'm going to ask you, if you can answer that, you would probably solve what Ms. Coe referred to as trust. There is a massive amount of skepticism about our federal government, and I think you can directly trace it back to this event. And so I want to know why. And I think that's what all of America wants to know. We can kind of get a feeling for what happened, but we all want to know why it happened the way it did. Why was there this mastering, this control of all of this operation? So I'm going to start with you, Mr. Horn, and then go down to each one of you. And then I have a list of documents that I think need to be released, Madam Chair. Mr. Horn.
There is so much medical evidence that is tainted or missing or destroyed.
But why did that happen?
or altered, that there's no reason to have confidence in the autopsy report. Those things, I'm going to get there, sir.
Okay.
Those things would not have happened if a lone nut had killed the president. If a lone nut killed the president, there's no reason to do all those things, to destroy x-rays, to possibly alter autopsy photos, although that's not yet been determined. It's a question that remains outstanding, to alter the existing skull x-rays. So you don't do those things, and you don't change the autopsy conclusions 4 different times within 2 weeks after the president's death if a lone nut killed the president. So it's clear to me that the government, these are my conclusions after years of study. It's clear to me that the government was trying to manage what story it could sell to the American people. That's what was going on. And that's why the autopsy conclusions changed 4 times in the first 2 weeks. Have I come close to answering your question or not?
Yeah, Mr. Horn, you have, I don't have time to ask and get a response from all of you because my time has expired, but I would say I took some notes on what they were saying, Madam Chair.
Chairman, Chair Lady, it'd be all right if I yield half my time to Representative Biggs. Would that be okay with the ranking member? All right.
Thank you. And so then
That's 2.5 minutes.
I needed the math. Thank you. And so we'll just go down to Judge Thunheim.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question you pose as to why. I mean, I think that clearly, if you look at the history of all of this, there were cover-ups by both the FBI and the CIA, perhaps other organizations, in part because they had a lot of contact with Oswald in advance of the assassination, and there's no evidence that they alerted the Secret Service to the erratic behavior of Oswald. Oswald was in New Orleans. There was CIA contact with him then when he was a volunteer for this Fair Play for Cuba committee. I mean, they knew all about his visit to Mexico City. Both the FBI and the CIA knew about it. The FBI was following him in Dallas because he was a suspect in another shooting. All of this suggests that they had a lot of contact with him ahead of time, and I don't know what that suggests other than the fact that they wanted to cover that up, the fact that they knew a lot about him ahead of time and didn't do much about it.
Thank you. And Mr. Hardway, do you subscribe to that as part of the explanation, as well as the not a lone gunman nut theory of Mr. Horn?
I have no opinion on Mr. Horns because I don't know anything about the medical evidence.
Okay.
In regard to why the CIA would go to the length of running an operation against us, they obviously had something that they were very desperate about hiding. And I go into that in my written statement. To do it, you have to get into the weeds of the details. But basically, just to summarize it, they were using Oswald operationally in Mexico City.
All right. Thank you. And since I'm going to be out of that 2.5 minutes, let me just go real quick. I asked that we obtain a copy of Mr. Hardway's report. At least I don't have it, regarding Oswald in Mexico. Release the Joannides file, the JFK files in Belarus and Moscow, the files on Jack Ruby, and also to the Manchester interview of Jacqueline Kennedy and Robert Kennedy. And also, Madam Chair, finally,
Thank you, Mr. Biggs.
Bruder film.
We'll be taking a look at that, and then also representing, referencing the Joannides files, so everyone's tracking. We are actively trying to track that down. I believe that that is the one outstanding document that the CIA will not be able to find. So, isn't that interesting? I'd like to now recognize Mr. Garcia for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Coe, I wanted to start. Thank you. I know you're an experienced historian. You've written a biography, of course, of President Kennedy. For me, I'm always interested. I'm a big believer in the notion that the FBI and the CIA, particularly in earlier versions, have been and overclassified an enormous amount of information, not just on the topic of President Kennedy's assassination, but just throughout the government. And there's a lot, I think, to criticize those agencies and a lot that the American public should be concerned with in the way they have influenced and tried to influence American policy and world events throughout the decades. I think that part is clear. I also think it's important. Before taking this job, I longtime educator, was on the faculty, done an enormous amount of research. For me, following facts and ensuring that we are sticking to facts is really important, even as we seek to gain more clarity about historical events. And so I appreciate that. As it relates to the March 18th release of the documents, which I think has brought certainly more color and more information to the historical record. You had said earlier in your testimony that there was not necessarily, an enormous amount of new information, but there certainly was some additional kind of color to what we already know. Do you want to talk about that and as far as how important was that declassification of additional records to the broader picture of President Kennedy?
Thank you, and thank you for this time and these questions. I have to say that I am a little bit concerned about the way certain theories were presented as facts on the panel, and that there's a lot of demand for more information, which is always good, but it's based on the pretense that what has been found has radically changed everything. And I don't see that as true. I think we're still finding things. I'm not convinced that some of the details weren't already out there. There have been leaks, there has been access. So I do think that this idea of a grand conspiracy, I do think that, and I'm glad that we can all agree that there was incredible overreach in the mid-20th century and for some time. And there are wonderful books on Hoover that give greater color to that and background that have made contributions. And in particular, I think last year or the year before, there was a biography called G-Man by a professor named Beverly Gage, and that was excellent. What I find to be an interesting disconnect here is that there is so much concern about cover-ups with the CIA when it comes to Kennedy. And I don't see that same concern being translated to Martin Luther King and to his records. It feels like Hoover 2.0. And in that case, in the case of MLK, we do know that there's actually a historical precedent. The FBI mounted illegal surveillance. There was character assassination.
And Ms. Coyne, and I think just to
Yes.
time, and just so you know, there also is a lot of interest, I know, from members of the committee on both sides of the aisle on what you're discussing. I want to go to, before I go to Judge Tunheim, because I also am in a similar place where I feel that, my researcher brain is very much. I agree. I don't know that the release of the documents presented any sort of groundbreaking new information. Certainly added color and more rounded out kind of what we already know. But I want to just caution us in not using what was released as a kind of jumping off point to additional conspiracies. Right now, I think there are valuable questions. And I respect members of this committee that are looking to get certain questions answered. That there's a lot of concern in the public, and there is public interest in this. I mean, there is no question in that, and so I respect that. But I also value that we stick to what we know. Certainly, if there are questions that lead us in a different direction, we'll follow those. But I think that's really important. Judge Tunheim, I just also want to ask you, just similar to what I asked Ms. Coe. Do you think that this release of the records that just happened has added any substantial new information to what we already know?
I think any release of records gives you more color, more pieces of the puzzle, so to speak. And I think this has been very interesting. I haven't had a chance to look through a lot of the materials, but a lot of the materials that have redactions in were materials we never saw. So they weren't shown to us before. So I think that is significant that there are documents being released there. I don't see any new answers to any of the old questions here, but it's filling out the record more. And I'd like to see a time when everything has been released, unredacted. It's 60 some years since the assassination. The assassination was closer to World War I than we are to the assassination. Let's release the materials. And that's my plea here, is just get everything out, let people decide what they want.
Well, thank you. And with that, I yield back.
Thanking Rep. Garcia. The chair would now like to recognize Mr. Burchett for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Lady. Dr. Curtis, what happened when the Warren Commission called you to testify about what you knew about the JFK wounds? Dr. Curtis.
Could you say that again?
Yes, sir. I'm sorry. I've got hearing aids too, so don't worry about it, brother. What happened when the Warren Commission called you to testify about what you knew about JFK's wounds?
Well, the Warren Commission hasn't called me to testify at all.
Not at all. Okay.
I didn't use up all my time, and I'd like to make some additional comments regarding.
Sir, you have the time that you need, so please proceed.
Okay. Well, let me know when I can do it.
Well, now, sir, I believe Mr. Burchett has a line of question for you,
Yes,
so you're free
okay.
to talk to Mr. Burchett.
Yes, sir. Can you explain what condition, when President Kennedy arrived in the emergency room, what was his condition at that point?
He had already died.
Okay. How many wounds did you observe on President Kennedy?
How many wounds? President Kennedy had a wound to, of course, the big wound to his head,
Right.
but he also had a wound to his throat. And I've got a little diagram here. I can point that out how that worked if you'd like me to.
And that wouldn't have been a single bullet wound though, right? They talk about this magical bullet that traveled. That would have been more than one bullet, you think?
Magic bullet didn't strike the president at all.
Okay. Yeah, that was a clean bullet. I saw the picture. Do what? What? Oh, yeah, please show the diagram.
Okay. The bullets that were fired, the blue bullet was the bullet that arrived first. And you can see it started probably from the railroad trestle, which is to the southwest, and came up and first struck President Kennedy before he got out from under the tree that prevented the window shooter from shooting. Then, and we know that because the Zapruder film showed President Kennedy holding his throat in real distress when the Zapruder film started, and he had already been shot, and that wound to his throat would have killed him. It did kill him because we know from the tracheostomy that we had to do that the bullet to his throat obstructed the trachea, and so he had taken his last breath before that. Also, the bullet that struck President Kennedy in the temple killed him also because he just removed about a third of his brain. And the part of the brain that it removed was in the posterior part of the brain, and that is the area of the brain that controls the parasympathetic and the automatic nervous system. And so the two bullets that came from the Conley, from the window, one struck Conley, and it's the only thing that it did. It went in Conley's shoulder, went through his chest, came out of his chest into his left wrist, into his left leg, and that indicates that the bullet was coming from the north, going southeast, southwest, and that bullet was only for Governor Conley. The other bullet that came out was this other one here. Then that would have been the magic bullet. That's the one that went in the president's back. And the Warren Commission then wanted to choose that bullet to be the magic bullet, which went through the top of his head. Now that's essentially what I wanted to say.
Okay. And that was, how many bullets did you say? 3 or
That were
4?
fired,
Yes, sir.
4.
Okay. And that was a bolt action Italian
Well,
carbine.
2 of the bullets
allegedly.
came from the front.
Yes, sir.
And that
Yes,
was
sir. I know, but they were trying to tell us
the
if Lee
only-
Harvey Oswald was the
Only
same.
bullets that came from the window were 2 bullets, and 3 bullets came from the window. 1 hit the curb, the other hit Conley, and the other one went in the president's back. And that's well documented.
Yes, sir. Thank you. And I yield no time.
Thank you. The chair would like to now recognize Mr. Burleson for 5 minutes.
Thank you for your testimony, Mr. Hardway. It's clear that you faced firsthand the obstruction by the CIA. Would that be accurate to say in your investigations?
Yes.
And specifically, they used methods like use of sealed envelopes, redacted file redactions that violated the 1977 Memorandum of Understanding. My question really is about what seems to be evident is that they were very much obstructing any information about Oswald's interactions in Mexico City. Is that
That's
accurate?
correct.
Why do you think that is?
I believe that we can draw reasonable inferences from the evidence that is of record and that is very persuasive and clearly of record, that are facts and not theories, that clearly point to the fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was being used in an operation in Mexico City in September of 1963 and early October of 1963. The nature of the operation was a dangle and a propaganda operation designed to discredit the Fair Play for Cuba Committee. It was designed and ran by George Joannides under the supervision of David Atlee Phillips, who had been leading the CIA's anti-FPCC efforts since 1958. And it was a very successful operation. The Cuban consulate had just recently opened. The operation allowed them to observe from a distance the interactions and reactions of not just the Cuban consulate, but the Soviet embassy to Oswald's presenting himself. And it also went a real long way to discrediting the FPCC. In addition to that, you can see the exact same pattern of operation was conducted using Oswald in New Orleans in August of 1963, in which he encountered the DRE, also encountered student groups. It's almost it's a shadow of what they then did in Mexico City. Now, the fact that, in my opinion, the fact that they ran Oswald operationally in Mexico City does not mean necessarily, or even inferentially, that they were involved in the actual assassination. It's entirely possible that on November 22nd, 2 of the most surprised men in the world were David Atlee Phillips and George Joannides. And consequently, the one doesn't necessarily lead to the other in any way, shape, or form. But stop and think about it. If they were running an operation in which the accused shooter was involved as an asset, either witting or unwitting, think about the motivation for cover-up. It had to be something extraordinary that they were covering up in order to violate their charter, and in spite of the Houston Agreement that agrees not to prosecute CIA officers for crimes committed in the furtherance of their duties in the United States, in spite of that, they feloniously obstructed a congressional investigation. There had to be something significant that they were covering up, and what that significance was. And basically, David Robarge, the CIA historian, has in a backhanded way admitted that in things he's written, was the use of Oswald in an operation in Mexico City.
So you think that it was, if you had to be pressed on it, it sounds like there's 2 scenarios. One is that Oswald I mean, both scenarios, Oswald had some involvement in connection with the CIA. But in one scenario, he's being directed by individuals in the CIA to commit the assassination. And then the other scenario is that he did it and they just flubbed. They didn't pick up on the fact that he was planning this assassination.
I don't think we can draw any inference from the evidence on any of that as to whether or not he was being directed in the assassination. I don't think that David Phillips and George Joannides were directing him in the assassination. I don't think they would have been using him in Mexico if they did.
Some of the documentation indicates recently from the 2017 release that he was not alone when he went to Mexico City.
I can't say that he wasn't alone from the research we did in Mexico City. What we couldn't rule out was that he was imitated, or that another person was there pretending to be Oswald, or that some of the telephone conversations that were recorded on the taps at the Russian and Cuban facilities were actually Oswald speaking. In fact, it's pretty clear that some of the calls that claimed to be Oswald were not Oswald.
Wow. Thank you. My time has expired.
Thank you. The chair would like to now recognize Mr. Crane for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Ms. Chairwoman. Thank you guys for coming today. I want to start with you, Dr. Curtis. As a dental surgeon who was present in the hospital room the day President Kennedy was shot, you were able to observe his wounds and maybe some of his medical records. Is that correct? Can you not hear me, Dr. Curtis? So you were there in the emergency room the day that the president was brought in?
Yes.
How old were you, sir?
How old was I?
Yeah.
26.
26. And what did you observe when they brought the president in?
The president was already in the room before I arrived. And what I observed about him, that he had probably already deceased.
Since you were a dental surgeon, why did they bring you into the operation room?
That's one thing our inspector asked me, what is a dentist doing operating on the president? Then I had to qualify myself. The training that I have would encompass those particular procedures. And that's a simple procedure, and I did it well, and I just knew how to do it. There was nobody else there to do it, and I did it because Dr. Carrico asked me to do it.
Can you tell us about the wounds that you observed on the president and how they differ from what came out in some of the reporting?
The wounds on the president were to his throat and to his head and to his back. The wound to his throat would have killed him. The wound to his head definitely would have killed him. The wound to his back would not have killed him.
Did the wounds to his throat and his head look like completely separate wounds?
They were two separate wounds. The one, well, let me show it to you. The blue wound was sent from the railroad trestle all the way over to kill him right here, and that went to his throat. And the way that killed him is that it obstructed the trachea, and he couldn't breathe. So he would have been dead before he reached the hospital just simply because of that wound. The other wound that he had to his head would have killed him instantly because it removed about a third of his brain.
Thank you. Mr. Hardway, I want to move to you next. You talked about the obstruction of a federal investigation that you yourself witnessed. You were on the House Select Committee for Assassination, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What year would that have been?
1977, 1978. The obstruction occurred entirely in 1978.
What was your role in that investigation?
My role was a researcher with primary responsibility for researching Lee Harvey Oswald's activities in Mexico City and the CIA response to that.
We've heard about some of the administrative roadblocks that the CIA put up for you. Did you have any direct verbal communication with anybody at the CIA?
Oh, yeah. frequently.
Can you tell us
when-
about some of those conversation and how it might have been conceived as obstruction?
Well, when we first started, we had unlimited, unexpurgated access. We had 2 clerks assigned to us. We had our office at the CIA. Pretty much went to work out there every morning. We'd ask for a file, they would go get it, we would review it. It was unredacted and given to us in its original state. After they brought George Joannides in, he began slowly tightening down the process. We were no longer working with 2 clerks who went and got us our files. We had to file formally requests through him to get the files, and we started experiencing significant delays in the files that we would get. We started noticing that the files we would get would have obvious things missing from them. Then he went so far as to actually start putting parts of the files in envelopes and leaving them in the files, so that what we would get is we would sign that we'd seen the files, but we weren't allowed to open the stuff that he had placed in envelopes. That came back to haunt us later in dealing with the final report and some of the things we were trying to get out of them, when they would tell the chairman of the committee, he's seen that, here's where he signed for the file. And I would have to explain to Chairman Stokes that no, that was not in the file when I saw it, because that was what I was looking for and it was not there. It must have been in one of the envelopes. And so he eventually just shut us down. It culminated on one file that I really wanted to see. When it was presented to me, Mr. Joannides showed up himself to give it to me. He was actually bouncing on his toes. Him and Scott Breckenridge brought the file to me at the CIA, called me back out there to see it. It had not just been redacted, it had been retyped with the redactions in white space as it had been retyped. It was a report on a debriefing of a certain person. I exploded. I acted like a very angry 24-year-old and had choice words for both of them, and stormed out of the office and went back to the headquarters. I subsequently, thanks to Judge Tunheim's work, saw the memorandum to the record that Mr. Breckenridge wrote. And the memorandum for the record says that the file was shown to me and, quote, no objections were recorded, close quote. Notice the way you have to watch what the CIA says. He didn't say that I didn't make any, which is what everyone infers from what he said. What he said was none were recorded, and that's because he made the record.
Thank you. I yield back.
The chair would now like to recognize
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for your leadership on this committee. For decades, elements in our government have engaged in an extensive cover-up to subvert the will of Congress and to keep the American public in the dark relating to the assassination of John F. Kennedy. No matter how ugly it is or how inconvenient it is to elites, organized crime, or deep state bureaucrats, the American people deserve the truth, and they can handle the truth. While the American public still may be in the dark, poll after poll make clear the cover-up has failed. Approximately 2/3 of Americans still don't buy the official narrative from our government that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. Cover-ups and a failure to be transparent has rightfully bred distrust. So much distrust, nearly 40% of Americans believe the United States government was involved in the assassination of JFK. Let that sink in. Nearly 40%. This task force, working alongside President Trump, is working to use sunshine as a disinfectant and give the American people the pure, unvarnished truth they deserve. Mr. Hardway, thank you for being here to all of our witnesses today. You worked for the House Select Committee on Assassinations, which investigated the assassination of JFK. You had firsthand interactions with the CIA as you worked to get the truth. Based on what you witnessed, do you believe the CIA engaged in a concerted effort to cover up certain facts related to the assassination of President Kennedy?
Yes.
Do you believe the efforts to obstruct congressional investigations into the assassination of President Kennedy by the CIA you've described violated federal law?
People more expert in federal criminal law than I am have expressed that opinion to me and have expressed that opinion under oath.
Based on what you know, what relationship, if any, did the CIA have with Lee Harvey Oswald prior to the assassination of President Kennedy?
Based upon the circumstantial evidence of record, and it is overwhelming, they had they used him as either a witting or an unwitting agent of influence.
Seems that way, doesn't it? Do you believe there was evidence to suggest the CIA was using Lee Harvey Oswald in active intelligence operations shortly before the assassination of President Kennedy?
Yes.
Dr. Curtis,
Yes.
good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
You were one of the physicians who treated President Kennedy at Parkland Memorial Hospital after he was shot. You were better situated than almost anyone to see President Kennedy's physical condition when he arrived at the hospital. And yet you've said, I can't reconcile my knowledge of what I saw with the findings of the government, is what you said at the time.
Yes.
In your medical opinion, what do you attribute as the cause of President Kennedy's wounds?
The cause of his death,
Mm-hmm.
the 2 bullets were fired from the front, caused his death. And either one of them would have. The blue and the green
Yes, sir.
bullets.
And in your medical, in your opinion, how does this differ from the findings of the government as to the cause of the wounds to the president? How did this differ?
Could you say that again? I'm sorry.
How are your findings that you saw of his condition when he died? How are your findings different from the government? How did what the government said happened to John F. Kennedy Jr., JFK? How did your medical findings of his death, how were they different?
The government wanted the president to have died from the window, from the bullets fall from the window, because that would have caused the Harvey Oswald to have done it. And they went to great lengths to make those 2 bullets do the job. And those 2 bullets did not do the job. One went in the president's back, and the other went into Governor Connally. So those 2 bullets didn't do anything to kill President Kennedy.
Okay, my last question, Dr. Curtis, you ready? Are the wounds you observed consistent with the government's conclusion Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone?
No.
Thank you, sir. We thank all of our witnesses who are here today. Chairwoman, thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Representative Mace. I now recognize myself for probably more than 5 minutes. So my first question goes to Judge Tenheim. Why did you tell President Biden that the CIA had deliberately misled your board about the Joe Needy's file?
I did that because the CIA misled us. I mean, we had asked, we were picking up names all along, and people were telling us about other people to ask about. And we've been after the Joe Needy's file for a while, and what we got was something very small. It looked like just a personnel file, what he got paid and, when he separated and that sort of thing. And the staff looked at it and thought it wasn't significant and sent it back. In retrospect, we shouldn't have done that. We should have asked for more. But they were told that the staff was told that was all they had on Joe Needy's, which is clearly incorrect. So that's why I said that we had been deliberately misled by the CIA as to the nature of the Joe Needy's files that were there. And I think those files likely are still there and can be released and should be released.
Yeah, I'd like to actually know for the public that's tuning in that we have been in talks with Director Radcliffe, and although he's been supportive, there has, in my opinion, been an orchestrated effort previously to hide this information. And so they're, while actively searching for it, also having issues locating it. So we are trying on our end, but you are correct, sir, in that observation. And I thank you for being here today to testify to that. My next question is actually for Dr. Curtis. Was there anyone specifically on the Warren Commission that made the attempted effort, or that you felt you were being pressured to either be silenced on what you saw and or bullied and or threatened into not speaking the truth?
I was never pressured to be silent, But I did have action with Arlen Specter that was not good.
What happened, sir?
He did a deposition for me and had not told me about it ahead of time. The nurse leaned in the operating room that morning and said, the Warren Commission is in town. If you have time, go down and talk to them. So I finished my cases and went down and talked to our inspector. He was friendly and nice and was very well groomed in a beautiful suit, shiny shoes. And I had my hair all messed up in a scrub suit, dirty shoes. So it was definitely top down. And he was friendly and nice, and then started asking me biographical questions that made it obvious to me that he knew the answers to the question before he asked it. And so that made me wonder, why on earth does he know all that about me? Then he said, what did you see about the exit wound? Well, there wasn't one. Really? No, there wasn't one. And then, so he asked me 4 more times about the exit wound. And the last time he asked me is, Dr. Curtis, every other doctor has suggested and testified that there was an exit wound. And you didn't see it? No, I didn't. And so during the visit that I had with him was maybe about 20 or 30 minutes. And during that time, he made me feel that I had a reason for being in the trauma room to be sure the president died. Now, I had a wife and 2 babies at home that were completely dependent on me. If I lost my residency, it would be terribly a big problem for me. So he said, okay, now, you should wait here for a little bit before we do your deposition. I said, deposition? He said, yes, you're having to give a deposition today. And I said, well, I didn't know that. He said, well, I sent you a letter, which I didn't get. He said, do you want a lawyer? And I said, do I need a lawyer? He said, fella, you're the only one in this room that knows if you need a lawyer. Do you want me to get you one? I said, no, I don't think so. But he asked me over and over again about the exit wound. And then we got in on, then he got the committee together. And nobody that I'd ever seen before sitting behind the table and put me on a high stool uncomfortably. And I remember my foot kept slipping off that bottle rung, and then started asking me questions. Never did bring up the exit wound. He never did say a thing about it till at the last. He said, Dr. Curtis, did you see anything that was like a puncture or a opening in the trachea and or the throat? And I said, no. And he said, but then I thought, well, the blood was right over that, so I couldn't have seen it. So I said, but that doesn't mean it wasn't there. Thank you for Dr. Curtis. That's what he wanted.
Would it be fair to say that other doctors that you worked with that were in the room that day that were responding to President Kennedy's wounds had the same observations as you? Yes or no?
There were only 2 of us that thought of the throat before the tracheostomy was done.
Okay.
And is that the answer?
Whatever you would like to share with Congress, sir.
So I saw it, and there was no exit wounds. That's what the Arlen Specter wanted, was an exit wound, because the magic bullet had to exit the throat to go in to get over Conley, which couldn't have happened. The magic bullet would have had to make 3 90-degree turns to do what it did. It was coming down from the window, would have had to turn right angle to be horizontal through the neck, would have had to turn right again to go over to where Governor Connolly was, would have to turn right again to go into Governor Connolly. It doesn't work.
Yes, sir. I can speak for myself. I do not believe in the magic bullet theory.
Bullets don't do that.
No, do not. I do not, sir. My next question is for Mr. Douglas Horn. To your knowledge, did even the Dallas Police Department or the FBI subject Lee Harvey Oswald to a paraffin test to determine whether he had fired the gun on November 22nd, 1963?
I'm going from memory, but I believe the FBI did, and he tested negative for firing a rifle. With
So
the
he
paraffin test on his face shows he did not fire a bolt-action rifle, especially not a lousy rifle like the Mannlicher Carcano, which was an 1894 design or something.
What is the status of the record interview the author William Manchester conducted with Jacqueline Kennedy? Mr. Horn.
Well, my understanding is that, first of all, the Kennedy family liked William Manchester initially because he had written a campaign book in 1960 about the campaign. So they said, okay, why don't you write the book about the death of Jack, about the death of President Kennedy? When the book was reviewed by Jacqueline and Robert F. Kennedy, apparently Robert F. Kennedy had many objections. And so the Kennedy family sued Mr. Manchester when the books were in galley form. And they required that he take out certain portions of the text. So the lawsuit, what the lawsuit did was it said, the portions of the text that you removed will be sequestered until 2067, and the interviews you did with Jacqueline Kennedy and Robert F. Kennedy will be sequestered, withheld until 2067. So that was the result of that lawsuit. And so what we read today when we read Manchester's book is a sanitized or redacted version of his book, and we won't know what was removed until 2067. That's just very unfortunate. And I know Chairman Thunheim really made an effort to get Caroline Kennedy to agree to lift that court seal, and she didn't want to.
Also, to your knowledge, which autopsy photos are missing?
Okay, I'd be glad to answer that question. I have a list here, and it's reasonably succinct, so bear with me.
Well, you have me and Garcia here, so I
Yeah.
think
Okay, here we go.
we're at your disposal.
Here we go. I mentioned 8 sets that I know with confidence from studying the evidence as an analyst are missing. First, an overhead wide shot of JFK's body taken from a stepladder, taken by John Stringer, the Navy photographer. He testified under oath to that. Second, a large bruise atop the right lung, taken from inside the interior of the chest after the lungs were removed. So this is a large blood clot up above where the apical portion of the lung was. And that's been testified to by both Dr. Humes and Stringer that they took those photographs, so they're not in the record. Third, an entrance wound in the lower right of the skull with the scalp reflected, taken from outside the skull. And next, that same entrance wound in the lower right of the skull with the photo taken from inside the cranium after the brain was removed. So what's at issue with these 2 photos being missing is they would have determined definitively where was the entrance wound in the back of the head.
Would have been one of the Harper
No,
separate?
no, separate issue.
Okay.
The condition of the back of the, here's another missing photo. The condition of the back of the head after embalming and reconstruction was completed, which still showed an exit defect that could not be closed. The witness that claimed that was Sandra Spencer, a Navy photographer's mate who our general counsel, Jeremy Gunn, considered our most reliable medical witness. And so what she did was she developed color negatives and then prints of the president's body, postmortem photographs. But she said, when we deposed her, she said, oh, these pictures in the archives are horrible. We see open body cavities and a lot of blood, and the president looks really bad. She said, the photographs that I developed, he had been cleaned up. The head had been reconstructed, but there was still a hole in the back of his head even after the head was reconstructed.
So you have witness testimony that the archives photos do not reflect what?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, she testified under oath to that fact. Another missing photograph is a series, is that Robert Knudsen was a White House social photographer. He was involved with developing photography the weekend after the assassination by the president's military physician, Dr. Berkeley. So Knudsen testified to the HSCA that I developed a black and white film pack, negatives, black and white negatives, showing numerous probes in the president's body. And of course, probes are important because they determine bullet tracks. Where do bullets go in? Where do they come out? If they come out. And he remembered developing them and holding them up to the light in the darkroom after they were developed. And he remembered seeing probes in the body in this black and white film pack. And in the official autopsy collection, there was no black and white film pack used in photographs of the body. They're 4x5-inch duplex film. They're not black and white film packs. And there are no photographs of probes in the body in the official collection. And one of the people we interviewed was Dr. Carney, who was a resident at Bethesda. And when we told him, Jeremy Gunn and I, when we told him that there were no photographs of probes in the body in the official autopsy photo collection, he became visibly agitated and his face turned bright pink. And he said, I came in and out of the morgue many times as the resident on duty that night, but I saw flashbulbs going off when there were probes in the body. And you're telling me there's no photos in the collection? We said, that's right. So 2 more that are missing, and that concludes my answer. Black and white prints were seen by numerous people showing a large exit defect in the rear of JFK's head. So Mr. Knudsen, the White House photographer, Navy Chief Knudsen, showed such photos to another White House photographer, Joe O'Donnell, the week after the president died. Black and white prints showing a big exit wound in the back of the head. There are no such photos in the collection, but Joe O'Donnell said there were, and another witness that saw those photos was Navy Corpsman Dennis David. And he was shown those photographs by the Bethesda Naval Hospital audiovisual department head, Lieutenant Commander Pitzer. The last type of photo that's missing, black and white prints of an entry wound high in the forehead, up here, not in the temple, but high in the forehead, above the right eye. Black and white prints showing that were shown by Mr. Knudsen, by Chief Knudsen to Mr. O'Donnell. They were also seen by Dennis David when Lieutenant Commander Pitzer showed him autopsy photographs. And a third witness surfaced in the year 2010, Quentin Schwen, who lives in Cleveland. And he, during a federal job interview, believe it or not, during a federal job interview with an intelligence agency, when he was at the Rochester Institute of Technology, majoring in photography, he was shown a color positive transparency showing an entry wound high in the forehead of JFK. So that's my kind of lengthy answer on which photographs am I confident are missing.
Thank you very much. And then real quickly, because my last line of questioning is for Mr. Bolden. What is the evidence that you refer to about an interruption of chain of custody of President Kennedy's body prior to the start of the autopsy shortly after 8 p.m.?
Right. Yeah, because of this venue and this format, I'll have to give you a streamlined answer. I'm sure everyone will appreciate that. We know for a fact that the motorcade from Andrews Air Force Base with a bronze Dallas casket in it arrived in front of Bethesda at 6:55 p.m. Remember that time. That's documented by the Secret Service report of Agent Clint Hill and by newspaper reporters. But the review board obtained an extremely important document written by a Marine Corps non-commissioned officer, Sergeant Boyjan of the United States Marine Corps. He led a team of Marines from the Marine barracks in Washington, D.C. to provide physical security at the autopsy. This was not the honor guard in dress uniforms. These were Marines from the Marine barracks to provide physical security. He wrote a report of what happened that night, and he wrote in his report dated November 26th, 1963, he wrote that, and he's only talking about what happened with the president because that was his job, was to guard the president's body during the autopsy. He wrote that the casket arrived at 1835 hours. 1835 hours. That's 6:35 p.m., 20 minutes before the motorcade from Andrews arrived. And there is a considerable amount of evidence, a wide range of evidence, that the president's body really arrived by helicopter before the motorcade from Andrews. That's the broken chain of custody. And the issue here, it's a very important issue. The issue here is, if Sergeant Boyjan's report is correct, and he authenticated that to the review board staff, he authenticated that to me with a written letter and with a telephone interview. If his report is correct, then what was happening with the president's body between 6:35 p.m. and 8 o'clock when the autopsy of record started? That's almost an hour and a half. And the simple answer, the streamlined answer, appears to be that many metal fragments were removed from President Kennedy's body before the autopsy of record began. We have witnesses for this.
Those would be the bullet fragments, correct?
Yes. Tom Robinson of Gawler's Funeral Home saw a vial full of 10 tiny fragments, which he saw picked out of President Kennedy's brain. They were never placed in the record. Dennis David, HM1 Corpsman Dennis David, typed a receipt for a federal agent of 4 large bullet fragments. He thought it would be mass larger than 1 bullet and less mass than 2 bullets, somewhere between 1 and 2 bullets, 4 large fragments. He typed the receipt. He was allowed to handle the fragments by the federal agent. We wouldn't do that today. And the agent took the receipt, the typewriter ribbon, and the fragments, and they were never introduced in the record. So we also have 2 witnesses. To make a long story short, we have 2 witnesses to surgery on the cranium to get this evidence out. And Dr. Humes, the chief pathologist, said under oath to the Warren Commission that I never, to Arlen Specter, I correct myself, Dr. Humes said under oath that I never had to perform a craniotomy. I never had to saw the skull open to get the brain out. And when Dr. Fink arrived late for the autopsy, he was the outsider, the Army guy, he arrived at 8:30. Humes told Dr. Fink, no sawing of the skull was necessary. So the end of my response here is that we have 2 witnesses, X-ray technician Ed Reed, under oath to the review board, and Tom Robinson, to both the House committee and to the review board. Tom Robinson told the same account to both the HSCA and to us that he saw Dr. Humes saw the skull open. So I think bullet fragments were removed from the president's body before the autopsy of record began, and that's why we should have no confidence whatsoever in the autopsy.
Thank you very much. My next question is for you, Mr. Bolden. Mr. Bolden, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, sir. Thank you for sticking with us so long. I know it's been kind of long, but if you can, real quick, what did you observe about the Secret Service investigation of President Kennedy's assassination?
It was one of the greatest cover-ups of a crime. Now, the Secret Service initiated so many cover-ups. Number one, the number of bullet fragments that were found in the car. Harry Gagnon on November the 26th looked at the car, the assassination automobile, and he found 2 cartridges laying on the front floorboard. They were very damaged. And he also observed a bullet hole in the windshield. And he was told not to let the FBI know about any of this and to get the car to Michigan somewhere where they could put a new windshield in and clean the car up. Now, the biggest thing that I was talking about was the violations of constitutional rights that followed, especially in my case, simply because I wouldn't be quiet. I was framed, I was arrested, they attempted to declare me insane. And I was put in Springfield, Missouri, forced to take drugs, mind-boggling drugs. Now that stemmed from the fact that on the 18th of November 1964, I was called to Washington, D.C. And so they told me they were going to give me another name, change my identity, and that I would become another individual. And that, in fact, did happen. And I think that they were setting me up for assassination myself. I think that that's what was going on. Because when they sent me to the penitentiary, they made it clear that it was a case of my being so agitated about the assassination that I would keep quiet. And so they gave me 2 trials. They had 2 convicts that I had arrested. And they put me on trial twice in 1 month. And that was never heard. They kidnapped me out of Washington, D.C., violation of my constitutional right, denied me an attorney simply because they said I was not a player. I was not a team player. I wouldn't keep my mouth shut. And so when they did that to me, they sent me to Springfield and put me in a camp there where I was threatened by one of the inmates. And they used that as an excuse that on July the 7th, 1967, 2 guards came to the camp and got me and took me to what they call 2 1-E's. And they undressed me, got me naked, threw me in a cell. And the next thing I know, they were forcing medication on. The guard came by, he says, we have medication time. I said, I haven't been before in court. No court has said that I was insane. You're supposed to take me to the court. But they didn't do that. They forced me to take these drugs. One of them knocked me out. I fell on the floor. And they had to go into the hospital to have it looked at. And this is how they treated me now. I was kidnapped out of Washington, D.C., brought to Chicago, denied an attorney by the United States attorney. It would be handwritten. I was then not given any food on that night, which was May 18, 1964. They didn't let me eat anything because they kept talking about I was not a team player and I didn't keep my mouth shut. And this is how that they control the cover-up. Agents became afraid. They didn't want to talk. And there were so many cover-ups. The chief Rowley put out a memo that said any agent that gave information other than the information that he would provide would be censored severely. Well, when they found out that I wanted to go to the Warren Commission, who was investigating the case appointed by President Johnson, I asked to go testify to the Warren Commission about what the Secret Service were doing and the type of protection that President Kennedy was receiving. And so they brought me from Washington, D.C., denied me an attorney. Every constitutional right was violated and forced me to take medical drugs, strip me naked, remove me to such prisons. Now here I was in ex-Secret Service. They locked me up with people whom I had put in jail myself. I was threatened by these people. And it really affected me and my wife, Uproar, who stuck with me throughout this ordeal. And to anybody who's listening, if you have a good wife like God was, keep her. Keep her, because that's the scripture said. The double band is not easily broken. And they're talking about people like my dear wife who passed away in 2005. So I just want people to know that the constitutional rights, when I was on trial in July the 12th, the jury was debating whether or not on the verdict. The judge called the jury report and told the jury, in my opinion, Bolden is guilty of all the counts in the indictment, which were 3 counts. That jury did not find me guilty. So the judge set another trial for 2 weeks later. For 2 weeks now, a second trial. And we asked for a new judge. The judge himself, in violation of the federal procedure, heard the motion himself. And the law said that if a complainant files a motion for change of judge, that the judge who the complainant against shall not make the decision as the prejudice act. So here I am now, it took me 90 years. 90 years when I ended up looking into it, it broke my heart. Because America is supposed to be the leader in constitutional right. It's supposed to be the leader in democracy. Yet, I felt so abandoned by the system. But I'm glad I did. And I would do it again because American people need to know the truth.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bolden. And again, thank you for your testimony. Yes.
For sure. I'm Tyler Nixon. I'm counsel for Mr. Bolden, and I can just give a minute of clarification here. Mr. Bolden was, in fact, prosecuted on what, I've delved into this case very deeply. This was one of the most rigged. You want to talk about weaponization of the judicial system and the justice system. This man was railroaded. He had a judge, as he said, who told the jury that he believes that he was guilty. He set a new trial, and the 2 accusing witnesses were 2 men that he had arrested previously as counterfeiters. And the main witness who purportedly, out of the goodness of his heart, went to the head of the Secret Service, Maurice Martineau, to report the supposed solicitation of a bribe, which was the accusation, admitted in his trial about 4 months later that he perjured himself in Mr. Bolden's trial.
Yes, Mr. Nixon, we actually would be happy to collect all that information off record, but just due to process, as you're not a stated witness, we just have to be careful about, but we, I will say, at least I speak for myself, I do not believe that Mr. Bolden was actually guilty of a crime. I do believe that he was falsely, if you will, framed. And so on behalf of the U.S. government, we'd like to apologize to him and his family, because obviously that's not how we are supposed to treat people in this country. And so you have our sympathy and as well as our apology for the treatment of that. But we will be happy to follow up on that, because as as stated, we would like to collect and make sure that this does not happen to future individuals, and that requires changing of laws and also putting protections in place. But I would like to thank all of you. We've gone way over our time today, but the fact that you all traveled in and were willing to come testify, especially you, Dr. Curtis, Mr. Bolden, Judge Tenheim, Mr. Hardway, Mr. Horn, and Ms. Coe, thank you so much for coming here today. If you do have any other information you would like to submit to the task force, we will happily accept that, and we will be following up on some of these suggestions that you have all made today. And with that, without objection, all members will have 5 legislative days in which to submit materials and additional written questions for the witnesses, which will be forwarded to the witnesses for their responses as well. If you'd like to submit anything else to the record, we'd be happily accepting of that. If there are no further business, without objection, the task force stands adjourned.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being here in the Oval Office, one of the great places of the world, as we make a historic announcement about the Golden Dome Missile Defense Shield. That's something we want, and Ronald Reagan wanted it many years ago, but they didn't have the technology. But it's something we're going to have. We're going to have it at the highest level. I want to thank Secretary Hegseth, who's been fantastic, and Secretary Rubio, and Space Force Vice Chief of Space Operations, General Mike Gutlein. I also want to recognize Senators Dan Sullivan, Kevin Kramer, and Jim Banks, fantastic senators, great talents, great political talents, and people that love our country. In the campaign, I promised the American people that I would build a cutting-edge missile defense shield to protect our homeland from the threat of foreign missile attack. And that's what we're doing. Today, I'm pleased to announce that we have officially selected an architecture for this state-of-the-art system that will deploy next-generation technologies across the land, sea, and space, including space-based sensors and interceptors. And Canada has called us, and they want to be a part of it. So we'll be talking to them. They want to have protection also. So as usual, we help Canada do the best we can. This design for the Golden Dome will integrate with our existing defense capabilities and should be fully operational before the end of my term. So we'll have it done in about 3 years. Once fully constructed, the Golden Dome will be capable of intercepting missiles, even if they are launched from other sides of the world, and even if they are launched from space. And we will have the best system ever built. As you know, we helped Israel with theirs, and it was very successful. And now we have technology that's even far advanced from that, but including hypersonic missiles, ballistic missiles, and advanced cruise missiles. All of them will be knocked out of the air. We will truly be completing the job that President Reagan started 40 years ago, forever ending the missile threat to the American homeland. And the success rate is very close to 100%, which is incredible when you think of it. You're shooting bullets out of the air. I'm also pleased to report that the One Big Beautiful Bill will include $25 billion for the Golden Dome to help construction get underway. That's the initial sort of a down deposit. And we have probably, you're talking about, General, we're talking about $175 billion total cost of this when it's completed. This afternoon, I'm also announcing that I will appoint, very importantly, General Gutlein to lead the ambitious new effort as the direct reporting program manager for the Golden Dome. Very talented man, and I'm very honored to have been the one that helped or really created Space Force. Space Force has turned out to be a tremendous success. We were third in space, and now we're number one in space by a lot. It's not even close. And Mike is a 4-star Space Force general, the recipient of the Defense Distinguished Service Medal, one of the most respected people in the world having to do with defense. You know, we have offense and we have defense. I'll bet he's good at offense. and he has an unmatched background in missile warning technology and defense procurement. General Goodline also knows that we need to move fast. No one is more qualified for his job, and everybody, this was a universal acceptance of General Goodline. Everybody that knows him and knows everybody else, they said there's only one man for the job, so I have a feeling we have the right guy. But now I'd like to invite Secretary Hegseth and the General to please say a few words and describe the system a little bit. And we appreciate you being here. The press has really been very fair over the last period of a couple of months. I don't know what happened to you. It was so much more exciting the other way, but you've been very, very fair. We have very high poll numbers, the highest we've ever had. And I think we're doing a great job. We had a tremendous trip to the Middle East, as you know. It was a really amazing trip. And now I came home, and this is the one I was really looking forward to this day, because this is very important for the success and even survival of our country. It's a pretty evil world out there. So this is something that goes a long way toward the survival of this great country. And as I said, we'll be discussing Canada. They want to hook in, and they want to see if they can be a part of it. That sort of makes sense. I guess that's what I was talking about from day one. You know, it just automatically makes sense, and it won't be very difficult to do, but they'll pay their fair share. Thank you very much, everybody. And Pete, go ahead.
Well, Mr. President, add this to the long and growing list of promises made and promises kept. Ultimately, this right here, the Golden Dome for America, is game changer. It's a generational investment in the security of America and Americans. Mr. President, you said we're to secure our southern border and get 100% operational control after the previous administration allowed an invasion of people into our country. President Reagan 40 years ago cast the vision for it. The technology wasn't there. Now it is, and you're following through to say we will protect the homeland from cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, hypersonic missiles, drones, whether they're conventional or nuclear. It's not lost on me, sir, also that you had the vision to start the Space Force. And here we are when the others said we didn't need it, here we are in the Oval Office with one of the leaders of the Space Force in General Gutlein, leading the charge on putting in place a game-changing Golden Dome for America. So, sir, it's an honor to be a part of this bold initiative. We're going to get to work on it. We have been since you signed that executive order on January 27th. We've been fast forward on this, but we're here on this day, and this is just one stop in delivering this defense of the homeland, which is something you've charged us with doing, and we'll keep going until it is complete, sir.
Thank you, Pete. Pete's doing a great job, by the way. Thank you very much. General, please.
Mr. President, today is a great day for the nation as we double down on protection of the homeland. As you're aware, our adversaries have become very capable and very intent on holding the homeland at risk. While we have been focused on keeping the peace overseas, our adversaries have been quickly modernizing their nuclear forces, building out ballistic missiles capable of hosting multiple warheads, building out hypersonic missiles capable of attacking the United States within an hour and traveling at 6,000 miles an hour, building cruise missiles that can navigate around our radar and our defenses, and building submarines that can sneak up on our shores, and worse yet, building space weapons. It is time that we change that equation and start doubling down on the protection of the homeland. Golden Dome is a bold and aggressive approach to hurry up and protect the homeland from our adversaries. We owe it to our children and our children's children to protect them and afford them a quality of life that we have all grown up enjoying. Golden Dome will afford that. I greatly appreciate your trust in me and your nomination in me and your trust in the team to deliver this. It is a great day for America.
And also, very importantly, it's we're the only ones that have this, we call it super technology. Nobody else has it. And nobody else has really near what we have. So this is a very exciting project. This is something that will, I mean, the general said close to 100% protection. So that's something we need. I think it's a very, and everything's going to be made in the USA, by the way, very importantly. So it's something that I've been looking forward to for a long time. And I just noticed you too, Jim, you're standing there, and behind you is a very important document, Declaration of Independence. And that was in the vault for many decades right under this area. They have vaults with pictures on top. You have Abraham Lincoln. You see, that was the original Abraham Lincoln, the original Washington. And does everybody know who the middle was? General Grant. And so it's very exciting. You look over here, and above Ronald Reagan, you have Thomas Jefferson. That's Monroe from the Monroe document. And you know who that is, right? Andrew Jackson. So we have a lot of very exciting pictures, and on the other side, likewise, some great presidents and great people on many of these, because people were asking about them. Many of them, almost all of them, were in the vaults or nearby, but generally in the vaults downstairs, where we have some great. So it's very exciting, and the place has become a little different than you first saw it, Jim, right?
Yes, much
It's a little bit different. It's slightly better. But to think we had them, and some were in the vaults for over 100 years. So it's pretty cool stuff. Everybody knows Jim Banks. He's a great congressman, and now he's a great senator from Indiana. And you might want to say a few words.
Well, your legacy with Space Force, Mr. President, is already big, but the Golden Dome is going to be an even bigger legacy for our country. And Indiana is going to help you make it.
Right.
The space satellites that are made at Fort Wayne, Indiana by L3 Harris, all the work done at Crane Navy Base in Southern Indiana is going to be a big part of it. And Hoosiers are very proud of that. We're proud of you. Thank you very much.
It'll be a big factor. Thank you, and good luck, and congratulations. You won that race by a lot. That wasn't even a contest, right?
Well, thank you. Thanks to you and all of your support.
Thank you very much. Thanks. Please go ahead. You missed that. This is Senator Kramer, and he's one of our best. Can't get any better. Go ahead.
Well, you're very nice, Mr. President, and thanks for this. And I remember the day in your first term when you called, and I was a brand new baby freshman senator on the Armed Services Committee, and you said, I want to have a Space Force. Would you lead the effort on the Senate Armed Services Committee? And I felt so proud thinking that you chose me, only to find out later no one else would do it. But nonetheless, it worked out really, really, really well because North Dakota has some great space assets. Yeah. And that contribute to that and to Golden Dome. No surprise that you would be the president that would come along and put the homeland first. And this is just one more example of that. So thanks for this and for allowing me this opportunity. By the way, let me just add my strong endorsement of General Goodline's role in leading this. I don't know anybody better, for sure, better equipped to do it than he is.
Everybody said that.
Yeah,
that's
for sure.
Dan Sullivan, Alaska, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you for your continued leadership on missile defense. We were talking earlier how in 2019 at the Pentagon, you laid out a speech about the Missile Defense Review that had all these principles on missile defense you articulated then during your first term. And now the Golden Dome is all of that. So you're continuing to lead. We really appreciate it. The Congress is stepping up, as you mentioned right now in the budget reconciliation bill, $25 billion for the Golden Dome. And what Senator Kramer and Senator Banks and I and many others, we're working on and I briefed you on this before, sir, on our Golden Dome Act, which we think will have, in terms of legislation that can help cement what you're doing right here, getting the Congress behind it, not just with the funding, but with authorization. So we're working closely with Secretary Hegseth, General Gutlein, the whole team. So we're very honored to be here, sir. And, Alaska is the cornerstone of missile defense right now in terms of ground-based missile interceptors, in terms of radar systems and track incoming missiles. So my state is honored to continue to play a critical role in all of this and build on it. And we're really excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dan. Great. Any questions?
Mr. President, you had mentioned at the beginning of your remarks that this was a campaign promise of yours. Have military commanders asked for this system specifically? Because NORAD had said previously that the current system was adequate. So what does this get the United States
Somebody said the
isn't
current
already
system is
in
adequate.
before?
There really is no current system. We have certain areas of missiles and certain missile defense, but there's no system. We just have some very capable weapons that hopefully we never have to use, but we have some very capable weapons. Now, this is a different league. There's never been anything like this. This is something that's going to be very protective. I think you can rest assured there'll be nothing like this. Nobody else is capable of building it either.
Was it something that military commanders asked you for? Did they ask you to do this?
Well, let me put it differently. I suggested it, and they all said, "We love the idea, sir." It's the way it's got to be, right? But they want it, and they wanted it badly once it was suggested. I don't know if they ever thought they would be lucky enough to have it, but we were able to get it done, and we have all the funding, so pretty much tucked away. I think most people feel it's very important to have. Yeah, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. When you first announced this idea
critics said it would be prohibitively expensive, potentially ineffective, and could trigger an arms race in space. What do you say to those critics about that?
Well, they're wrong. It's about as close to perfect as you can have in terms of real production. I told you Canada wants to be a part of it, which be, fairly small expansion. But we'll work with them on pricing. We'll be dealing with them on pricing. They know about it very much. They've asked to be a part of it, actually. They've asked us to be a part of it. I think it's something that is great. If you can afford to do it, we can afford to do it. We took in $5.1 trillion in the last 4 days in the Middle East. And when you think about it, this is a tiny fraction of that. But we make it all here. We're going to make it all here. We have, I will tell you, an adversary told me, a very big adversary told me the most brilliant people in the world are Silicon Valley. He said, we cannot duplicate, and we can't. This was somebody that I won't tell you who it is, but you'd be amazed. We have the most brilliant minds in the world doing this kind of thing, the equipment, the space, the computers, everything. But I said that we just can't duplicate what you have there in Silicon Valley. We never have been able to, and there's a very strong group of people and very strong minds, but they can't. So we have things that nobody else can have. You see what we've done helping Israel with that. You probably wouldn't have in Israel. They launched probably 500 missiles altogether, and I think 1/2 of a missile got through, and that was only falling to the ground as scrap metal. It's pretty amazing, and this is in terms of technology far advanced from that system.
And just one follow-up on the adversaries. Have you addressed Russia's ventures in space with a space-based nuclear weapon and told Putin to stop in your conversations with him?
We haven't discussed it, but at the right time we will. Yeah.
Mr. President, with the goal of keeping Americans safe with this, can you talk about the timeline? How long will this take to complete?
We think it's going to be about a little bit less than 3 years, and we'll have a big phase-in very early. We're starting immediately with $25 billion. It'll cost about $175 billion completed, but we think in 2.5 to 3 years.
Are you confident that you can get the funding needed from Congress
Yeah.
quickly?
It's amazing how easy this one is to fund. Some funding is tough and some is easy. When we say we're going to save everyone's lives in a crazy world, it seems to be very easy to get. Yeah, we've already spoken to everybody we have to speak to. Everybody's in, I would say, Dan, everybody's in line here, right?
Yes, sir. $25 billion is a down payment in the budget reconciliation bill right now.
Yeah, so I think
Mr. President, on Russia,
people actually love it.
Mr. President, on Russia, are you worried about the reports on a military buildup along the borders towards Finland and Norway?
No, I don't worry about that at all. They're going to be very safe. Those are two countries that are going to be very safe.
And the secondly, sir, if I may, Volodymyr Zelensky is saying today that he's hoping for you to impose new sanctions on Russia. Are you considering that?
Well, that's going to be my determination. That's going to be nobody else's determination. We'll see how Russia behaves. We see what's going to happen. We have a pretty critical time right now. I had a talk yesterday for 2.5 hours with President Putin, as you know. I also spoke to all of the European, or to many of them, leaders, but they were representing the whole. And I think we had very good conversations yesterday. Please.
Thanks, Mr. President. What companies have asked to be involved in building this system, and have you decided on who will be building it?
Yeah, I think I'll let you answer that. You can mention some of yours from Alaska's involved, and Alaska is a big part of it because locationally they're sort of perfect. I think that's your first line of defense in certain instances. And Kevin will tell you that his state's involved, but honestly, all Georgia's going to be very big. Florida is going to be very big. They're all going to be very big. Jim, do you want to talk about Indiana?
Yeah, in Fort Wayne, Indiana, where I live, we make all the space satellites at L3 Harris. Across the board, we're the top manufacturing state in the country. By the way, the tariffs have been very good for auto manufacturing.
They've been so good.
But this is going to be really good for the defense industry in my state. And there's so much money involved here. There are going to be a lot of American companies involved in making the Golden Dome.
You might also say, you're talking about the tariffs. He has some of the biggest auto plants in the world moving into Indiana, only for one reason, maybe two reasons, November 5th and the tariffs, okay?
Yes, sir.
But the tariffs have driven tremendous business into this country. But you have one of the biggest in the world being built.
The Honda Civics,
right?
The new Honda Civic made in Indiana. GM's added jobs. Eli Lilly moving pharmaceutical manufacturing from China to the United States, $27 billion. You go on and on with good news in Indiana and across the country because of the tariffs.
Our country was cold as ice a year ago, and now we have the hottest country in the world. This is the hottest country in the world. Nobody even close. If you look at even this last trip that I made, the respect that is paid to our country. We've went from being laughed at all over the world, and now we're the hottest country in the world by far. Dan, go ahead, please.
Yes, sir, Mr. President. I think when you look at the system that you've laid out, it's an idea in your executive order of a layered defense. So you have initial ground-based missile interceptors, which are made by some of the big defense companies, Lockheed, Martin, Raytheon. But the beauty of your vision, Mr. President, is that it's layered, it's open architecture, and it goes up into space. So this is going to be some of the new defense tech companies that are very interested in it and can bring missile defense at a cost that I don't think, you said it, Mr. President, is unimaginable in terms of how much lower the cost is. So it's all across the board in terms of companies. Senator Kramer and I just met with a bunch from last week that are interested in this. And you said it earlier, Mr. President, our technology sector is head and shoulders above any other place in the world. And they're going to be a key part of this. And I think that's why it makes it so exciting.
Mr. President, I think one of the things that's, and you alluded to this, the new autonomous space age defense ecosystem is more about Silicon Valley than it is about big metal, right? And so what's exciting about this is it makes it available to everybody to participate, to compete. Big companies, mid-sized companies, small companies, but General Goodline is the perfect person, again, to sort all that out because he understands how it has to work together ultimately.
And Pete, maybe we'll close with you. We have been discussing this for a long time. Pete and I used to discuss it when I was going to go on a show that he did very well and had tremendous ratings, but all he wanted to talk about was the military. He didn't want to talk about anything else. We used to talk about this. How about you closing it out?
Yes, sir. I mean, like I said, without your vision, willing to say and do things when other people wanted to look away and pretend like the threat didn't exist, or be focused on foreign adventurism, some other threat that we've been told is affecting us. When you looked at the data, sir, from Russia to the Communist Chinese and their capabilities, what they're trying to do to supersede us and threaten us, how do we find the best innovators, the best military leaders, the best companies, tech companies? You mentioned open architecture. That's exactly right. So multiple companies can pour into this, sir. It's a layered defense. So if you miss at one, you catch at the next. And it integrates existing technologies that can speak to each other. So it moves quickly while also investing in further ranging space-based interceptors. So our enemies, our adversaries are going to pay a lot of attention to this, just like they have to President Trump from day one. So you're defending the homeland, defending the American people. It's going to benefit my kids, grandkids, all of ours in this room. So thank you for your leadership. We're going to charge it as fast as we can.
Very good. Great job, everybody. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President.
No cuts. No cuts to Medicare. No cuts to Medicare.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States and First Lady Melania Trump.
Good afternoon and welcome to the White House. It's an honor to join you here today for the signing of the Take It Down Act, a national victory that will help parents and families protect children from online exploitation. This legislation is a powerful step forward in our efforts to ensure that every American, especially young people, can feel better protected from their image or identity being abused through non-consensual or intimate imagery of I and CII. Artificial intelligence and social media are the digital candy for the next generation. Sweet, addictive, and engineered to have an impact on the cognitive development of our children. But unlike sugar, these new technologies can be weaponized, shape beliefs, and sadly affect emotions and even be deadly. Over the past few months, I have met with brave survivors, deeply loving families, and caring advocates who know firsthand the emotional and psychological toll of NCII and deepfake abuse. Alliston Berry stood boldly for change, despite the risk posed to her and her family by speaking out and making her voice heard. Alliston, your voice and the voices of so many like you made this bill a national priority. Many thanks to members of Congress, both parties, for passing this legislation, including Speaker Johnson, Senator Cruz, Senator Klobuchar, Congresswoman Salazar, Congresswoman Dean, and Congressman Guthrie, and so many more. Thank you all for coming together to prioritize people over politics. As First Lady, my Be Best initiative is focused on improving children's well-being, encouraging kindness, and creating a safer online environment for our youth. Today, I'm proud to say that the values of Be Best will be reflected in the law of the land. I want to thank my husband, President Trump, for standing with us on this effort. His signature on this new law is not where our work ends on this issue. Now we look to the Federal Trade Commission and the private sector to do their part. Today, through the Take It Down Act, we affirm that the well-being of our children is central to our future of our families and America. Now it is my pleasure to introduce the President. Thank you.
Want to sit down?
Yeah.
Great job. That was a great job. Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. 5,000 young people every single week are being killed. So hopefully we did something. We also spoke to the heads of most of the European nations, and we're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up. What a shame that it ever started in the first place. So, but I want to thank Melania and for your leadership in this very important issue. It's an amazing issue. America is blessed to have such a dedicated and compassionate First Lady. I would tell you she is very dedicated. In fact, if you look at just what I heard, Putin just said they respect your wife a lot. I said, what about me? No, they like Melania better. That wasn't good. I don't know if that was good. I'm okay with it. I'm okay. I also want to congratulate the First Lady on securing $25 million in the first fiscal year, 2026, budget to provide housing and support for youth transitioning out of the foster care. And I can say that she loves children, and you really worked very hard on this, and you had a lot of help from some friends of mine right here, and a lot of the senators are here and congressmen, and I appreciate you all being here.
We're also grateful to be joined by people that are just in love with what we're doing. It's such an important situation, and commissioners of the Federal Trade Commission and the CEO of X, Linda Yaccarino. Where are you, Linda? Where are you, Linda? Thank you. Thank you, Linda. Stand up. Thank you, Linda. Great job. You're doing a great job. It's a big deal, right? That's great. Today, it's my honor to officially sign the Take It Down Act into law. It's a big thing, very important, so horrible what takes place. This will be the first ever federal law to combat the distribution of explicit, imaginary, posted without subjects' consent, take horrible pictures, and I guess sometimes even make up the pictures, and they post it without consent or anything else. And very importantly, this includes for forgeries generated by artificial intelligence known as deepfakes. We've all heard about deepfakes. I have them all the time, but nobody does anything. I asked Pam, can you help me, Pam? She says, no, I'm too busy doing other things. Don't worry, you'll survive. But a lot of people don't survive. That's true, and so horrible. With the rise of AI image generation, countless women have been harassed with deepfakes and other explicit images distributed against their will. This is the wrong, and it's just so horribly wrong. And it's a very abusive situation, like in some cases people have never seen before. And today we're making it totally illegal. Thank you. Upon hearing the stories of so many women affected, our First Lady made stopping these abuses a top priority, and she was given tremendous support because she'd go up to people and talk about it. They say, yeah, we know about it. We have the problem. Can we do something? And she did something about it with the help of a lot of the people, especially the political people sitting here today. Among Melania's guests in the gallery during my address to the joint session of Congress was a 15-year-old young person, Elliston Berry, whose image was turned into an illicit deepfake by a peer. Elliston, where are you? Are you around? Stand up, darling. That's fine. Beautiful. It's great. Thank you. It's fantastic. Elliston quickly became a powerful advocate committed to preventing other girls from suffering the same abuse. Elliston, we salute you and we thank you very much. And it's an honor to have you with us today. Great job you've done. Also with us are several other brave Americans whose lives were rocked by online harassment, including Francesca Manny, as well as a South Carolina State Representative, Brandon Guffey, and his family, who've lost their son to suicide after he was targeted in an internet extortion scam, of which you have a lot of them, a lot. I want to thank you both for your incredible work and to reach this important day. Could you stand up, please? Thank you. Thank you very much. Great job. I've read about it. Thank you very much. It's a real honor to have you here because there's no place like the White House, I found out. You know, you have a lot of places, and I just left some of the richest places, and we loved them, and they gave us a nice contribution of about $5 trillion, but this is a special place. Even they talk about it, so it's great to have everybody here. Under the law, I will sign in just a moment. Anyone who intentionally distributes explicit images without the subject's consent will face up to 3 years in prison. In addition, this law establishes new civil liabilities for online platforms that refuse to take these images down promptly upon request. We will not tolerate online sexual exploitation, and especially it's gone on at levels that nobody's ever seen before. It's getting worse and worse, and I think this is going to hopefully stop it. And not easy to do. People talked about all sorts of First Amendment, Second Amendment. They talked about any amendment they could make up, and we got it through because of some very brave people, including some very brave politicians in the audience. I want to thank the bill sponsor, Senator Ted Cruz. Ted, stand up, please. Great. Thank you, Ted. It's great. Very effective person. And Congresswoman Maria Salazar, friend of mine. Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for their amazing work. And thanks also to the 99 senators and 408 members of Congress who voted in favor of the bill. Wow, I wish we could get that vote from other things. We have another bill coming up. Do you think we'll get that vote? Maybe not. We should, but we probably won't. But working with our First Lady, we've shown that bipartisanship is still possible. That's true. With 99 senators, that's incredible. Senators, stand up. Look at that. John, you're here. Look at all of the senators. This is big stuff. I'm in trouble because I don't have your names. They didn't give me these names. We have so many. We have half of the Senate here. Now they're all going to hate me because I can't introduce you. We don't have the time for that. I have to get back to Putin and people. But thank you very much for being here, all of you, and congressmen, a lot of them, and women. Working with our First Lady, though, we've shown that bipartisanship is possible. I mean, it's the first time I've seen such a level of bipartisanship, and it's a beautiful thing to do. I'm not even sure you realize, honey, you know, a lot of the Democrats and Republicans don't get along so well. You've made them get along, and she didn't even know about that. She didn't know we had a problem. She didn't know we had a problem. She got it. But I want to thank you, honey. You've done amazing that this was done when you started. And I said, I don't know, it sounds like a tough one and yet a very important one. And you got it done. So I congratulate you. And I congratulate Ted, Maria, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you. And we'll sign the bill. Thank you. Around a long time, huh? Come on around. That's beautiful. Come on around. Hey, look at that.
I thought you were getting the deal.
You did it.
Out of our
got it. Thank you.
Thanks. Your leadership made this happen. So thank you.
I know. Thanks, Maria. That's fantastic. Okay, you ready? Okay, honey, you signing something? You want to sign it anyway? Come on, sign it anyway. She deserves to sign it. Okay, there we have it.
There we are.
That's a big one. Thank you very much, everyone. And you have some pens here. You most importantly, right? Oh, look at these white pens. I've never seen that before. I want one of them. I've never seen them. Here, Pamela, take that. Take that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
Just grab it. Thank you, everybody. You go ahead.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Mr. President, let me introduce you to Brandon, who lost his son, Gavin.
Let me get up.
He's a state legislator in South Carolina. He's been incredibly brave, and his whole family will thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain at your seats until the President and the First Lady has departed the Rose Garden. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us early today. We have a very busy day, so we wanted to kick off the week right this morning after a great trip last week. It's good to see all of you back in Washington. This afternoon in the Rose Garden, President Trump, alongside First Lady Melania Trump, will sign the Take It Down Act into law. First Lady Melania Trump was instrumental in getting this important legislation passed.
The Take It Down Act will protect victims of digital exploitation, hold internet platforms accountable by requiring them to remove such imagery from their platforms, and provide justice for victims by allowing prosecutors to go after those who publish non-consensual explicit images online. The First Lady met with members in the House and the Senate, survivors and their families, and advocates throughout the process to get this bill across the finish line. We are grateful for the First Lady's hard work and dedication to this issue. And moving forward, she will continue to champion the well-being of our nation's children through her Be Best agenda. I know the President looks forward to signing that bill into law later this afternoon, and we will see you all there. In other news, the One Big Beautiful Bill passed the House Budget Committee last night, bringing it one step closer to final passage. The One Big Beautiful Bill is perfectly named because it represents a once-in-a-generation opportunity to deliver on the Make America Great Again agenda responsible for President Trump's landslide victory on November 5th. The America First policies in this bill are the reason why Republicans currently have the majority in Congress right now. Passing this bill is what voters sent Republicans to Washington to accomplish. And that's why it's essential that every Republican in the House and the Senate unites behind President Trump and passes this popular and essential legislative package. This bill will be the single most pro-small business, pro-family, and pro-American worker legislation ever. This bill will give Americans the largest tax cuts in our nation's history. When Republicans pass the bill, Americans will be keeping more of their hard-earned money and taking home much bigger paychecks. The One Big Beautiful Bill will deliver some of President Trump's central campaign promises. No tax on tips for our hardworking waiters, waitresses, and service workers. No tax on overtime for our law enforcement officers, our firefighters, and all those Americans who are putting in extra hours to make ends meet. And a large tax deduction on interest payments for Americans who purchase American-made cars. Despite desperate Democrat lies, the biggest beneficiary of this tax cut will be working-class Americans and their families. Americans earning between $30,000 and $80,000 per year will pay about 15% less in taxes after this legislation is passed. And according to a brand new paper from the White House Council of Economic Advisors, the average family with 2 children's take-home pay will be up to $13,000 higher because of the increase in wages and reductions in tax obligations. The CEA study also said that the average overtime worker receives a tax cut of roughly $2,000. Again, this is great news for our nurses, our police officers, and all those who work overtime to make ends meet across our country. Put simply, President Trump's One Big Beautiful Bill will be a boon for working class America. This One Big Beautiful Bill is also pro-family. It will increase the child tax credit to $2,500 per child, establish optional savings account for newborn babies with a $1,000 credit added, and strengthen paid family leave. This bill also delivers historic tax relief to America's seniors by allowing middle and low-income Social Security recipients to deduct an additional $4,000 in payments from their taxable income. If Democrats get their way and the Trump tax cuts are not extended, Americans will face the largest tax hike in history to the tune of $4 trillion. Republicans must not side with Democrats in helping them raise taxes. The One Big Beautiful Bill also provides critical protections of Medicaid, which will strengthen and preserve the program for decades to come through common sense efforts to eliminate waste, fraud, and abuse. Medicaid will no longer be used to pay for barbaric gender mutilation procedures on minor children. And the 1.4 million illegal aliens who are currently improperly receiving Medicaid benefits will be kicked off the program to preserve it for hardworking American citizens who need it. President Trump and Republicans are protecting Medicaid benefits for pregnant women, children, disabled individuals, low-income seniors and families, and the most vulnerable Americans in our society. And that's what Democrats are so angry about. Basic Medicaid protections that will stop the funding of transgender insanity and illegal aliens from ripping off American taxpayers. As you all know, over his first 4 months in office, President Trump ended the previous administration's open border crisis and secured our homeland in record time, all using executive authority. Now Congress needs to act. The One Big Beautiful Bill is the most significant investment in our nation's border patrol and law enforcement agents in our nation's history. The bill ensures that President Trump's popular and successful border security measures are made permanent. Republicans have the backs of Border Patrol and ICE agents who were put through hell over the past 4 years and have quickly worked to secure our southern border. And that's why this bill gives them more resources to do their jobs, including a $10,000 much-needed bonus to ICE agents and Border Patrol agents over the next 4 years. To provide those brave agents with desperately needed reinforcements on the ground, the bill allows for the hiring of thousands of new ICE personnel, customs officers, and Border Patrol agents. These significant hirings will empower President Trump to continue delivering on his promise to carry out the largest mass deportation in the history of our country. Again, that is a promise that Republicans made to American voters. It's a promise they were elected on, and it's a promise Republicans on Capitol Hill need to keep: secure our border. To supplement those efforts, the bill's funds will fund the completion of President Trump's signature border wall. As a result, 701 miles of primary wall, 900 miles of river barriers, 629 miles of secondary barriers, and 141 miles of vehicle and pedestrian barriers will be constructed when this bill passes, along with cutting-edge technology to secure our homeland from dangerous illegal alien invaders. This bill also advances our national security and defense interests by ensuring the United States military has the necessary resources to remain the strongest and most lethal fighting force in the world. The bill will provide resources for the construction of President Trump's Golden Dome to safeguard Americans from potential attacks, give the Coast Guard resources to build more modernized ships, and the Air Force resources to acquire better planes. If all of those incredible things were not enough, the Big Beautiful Bill also finally modernizes air traffic control in America, a bipartisan issue. The bill will allow President Trump to deliver on his promise to overhaul and update our air traffic control systems to keep Americans flying as safe and efficiently as possible. The previous administration failed to act and do this themselves, despite repeated warnings from the GAO, which has resulted in unacceptable delays at major airports like Newark that the Trump administration is working hard to address. When the One Big Beautiful Bill passes, we will replace the current antiquated system. The FAA will enhance safety in our skies, reduce delays, and power the future of air travel in the United States. That's just some of what this historic legislation will accomplish. It is absolutely essential that Republicans unite behind the One Big Beautiful Bill and deliver on President Trump's agenda. There is no time to waste. Americans gave Republicans a once-in-a-generation opportunity to course-correct our country over many wrongs over the past 4 years. And Americans are counting on Republicans to work as hard as President Trump is in this White House every day on Capitol Hill. Send this legislation to his desk as soon as possible for his signature. Here in our new media seat today, we have Liam Cosgrove, the White House correspondent for Zero Hedge. With that, Liam, please kick us off.
Thank you, Caroline. So my first question is on foreign policy.
Sure.
The president has made several moves towards peace in multiple fronts: India, Pakistan with the Houthis, talking with Iran and talking with Putin. Biden didn't even talk to Putin for the entire span of the war, which is crazy considering two nuclear powers were engaged in a proxy war. So I do admire these moves by the current president, I'll be honest. However, as of today, we are still funding both Israel's and Ukraine's wars. So can Americans expect to finally be done financing foreign wars at some point? Do you consider that one of the president's goals?
Well, I think I can summarize the president's foreign policy agenda with 2 words: America first. And that means putting the American people and the American taxpayer first. And that's why the president is moving as quickly as he possibly can and working overtime to end these conflicts in both Israel and in Gaza, and also the Russia-Ukraine war. As you all know, the president will be speaking with Putin at 10 o'clock. He plans to call President Zelensky when that call concludes. I spoke to the president about that call at 10 o'clock. I don't want to get ahead of those very important conversations, but of course you will hear directly from the president or me after those calls conclude today. So you can expect that. As for Israel and Gaza, the president continues to not only himself, but his national security team engage in talks on both sides of this conflict. The president made it very clear to Hamas that he wanted to see all hostages released. And last week, When we were flying out of town, there was great news on that front with the return of Eden Alexander, who was the last remaining hostage in Gaza. So to answer your question, the president is always thinking about the American people, the American taxpayer first. He wants these conflicts to end, not just to save money, but most importantly, to save lives.
Thank you. And my only other question for you is, so over the weekend, President Trump posted Truth Social a video highlighting what most people call the Clinton body count, which is the strange number of suicides that seem to happen in Clinton circles. I have a headline here from the Washington Post that said, Trump peddles false conspiracy theories tying the Clintons to several deaths. So I just wanted to highlight real quick, this wasn't in Trump's video, but this is from the Arkansas Times. And it's the death of Mark Middleton, who was a former Clinton White House aide who was found dead on a Clinton Foundation property. And I'll just quote from the Arkansas Times. Middleton apparently shot himself in the chest with a shotgun and also hung himself from a tree with an extension cord. So I have no idea how somebody commits suicide that way, but if the Washington Post is here, maybe you can enlighten us as to how that was actually a suicide. So anyways, that's just a lead into my question about the most famous Clinton-related suicide, which is that of Jeffrey Epstein. There's still a lot of questions around that case. You've released phase 1 of the Epstein files. What was missing from that is any connection to his ties to intelligence agencies. And that's really the whole story, that not just trafficking young girls, but doing it on behalf of intelligence agencies and even potentially as part of a blackmail ring with potential ties to the Israeli government. So for phase 2, when can we expect it? Will it have information pertaining to those aspects of the Epstein case?
I know the Attorney General has committed to releasing those files. I would defer you to the Department of Justice on her timeline, but when she has made a promise in the past, she has kept it, and I'm certain that she will in this case as well. Rachel.
Thanks so much, Caroline. The president set a 2-week deadline for Ukraine and Russia to negotiate a deal. That time is now up. Does the president intend to set a new deadline on this call with President Putin? And how much longer is he willing to give these talks?
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of the specifics of the conversation the president will be having with President Putin in less than an hour this morning. But he has made clear throughout the entirety of this conflict, since he inherited it from Joe Biden. Don't forget, this is a war that began because of the previous administration's incompetence and weakness, and President Trump is working very hard to fix it. He has made it clear to both sides that he wants to see a peaceful resolution and a ceasefire as soon as possible. But as for specifics on a timeline, I won't get ahead of the president.
And just on the goals for this call in particular, is the goal to get Putin to agree to a ceasefire? Is the goal to lead to some sort of in-person negotiations with Putin and the president?
Well, I think, again, we'll see how the call goes. And the president has made it clear his goal is to see a ceasefire and to see this conflict come to an end. And he's grown weary and frustrated with both sides of the conflict. The president and his team have put an enormous amount of effort in solving this very complicated war that, again, began because of the last administration's weakness.
Does he still want to meet Putin personally?
I think the president would certainly be open to that, but let's see how this call goes today.
What's the status of the secondary sanctions package? The president's been talking about that. You haven't imposed them yet, but is that still on the table?
I think everything's on the table, yes. And again, I won't get ahead of the president in any commitments or decisions, but certainly it's something he's been looking at and discussing. Elena.
Hi, Ken. I'm going to ask you about the House budget bill. So does the president agree with Republicans behind this bill that Medicaid work requirements should be implemented as soon as 2026?
So the president wants to preserve and protect Medicaid for Americans who this program was intended for, the most vulnerable in our society: pregnant women, low-income families, seniors, those who truly need these benefits. And it should be going to people who physically cannot work. We want to see able-bodied Americans at least working 20 hours per week, whether that's part-time or full-time, whether that's even looking for work or volunteering for 20 hours a week if they are receiving Medicaid. These are common sense provisions. These are common sense changes that were actually introduced by former Democrat President Clinton. They've been supported by every Democrat president since, including the previous president, Joe Biden. But again, these are common sense reforms to ensure that those that this program was intended for receive those benefits.
And then just a quick follow-up. Is the president okay with this bill adding to the deficit?
This bill does not add to the deficit. In fact, according to the Council of Economic Advisors, this bill will save $1.6 trillion. And the president absolutely understands and hears the concerns of fiscal conservatives and of Americans who want to get our fiscal house in order. That's what the intention of this bill is. There's $1.6 trillion worth of savings in this bill. That's the largest savings for any legislation that has ever passed Capitol Hill in our nation's history. The next bill that even comes close was $800 billion. That's less than half of the savings that we see in the One Big Beautiful Bill. And so the goal of this bill is to produce economic growth, to cut taxes, and to get our fiscal house in order. And this is the right step in the right direction towards doing that.
Thanks.
Edward.
Yes, thanks.
And then I'll go to you.
Thanks,
You're welcome.
I want to get the president's reaction to Moody's downgrading the credit rating of the United States.
Sure. Well, look, the president talked about this over the weekend. The Secretary of Treasury also talked about it. When you look at the world has confidence in the United States of America and our economy once again. The president just last week secured trillions of dollars in investments from countries in the Middle East. We have seen trillions of dollars of investments flowing into our economy since the president took office. That is because America or people around the world have confidence in the United States of America. And if you also just look at the raw economic data that we're seeing last week when we were out of town, inflation dropped once again. Oil prices are dropping. Gas prices are dropping. The president has added nearly 500,000 jobs to the American economy already. So there's a lot of optimism in this economy, and the president disagrees with that assessment.
And I want to ask you one more thing, if I could. On your Middle East trip, the United Arab Emirates is getting some of the most advanced AI chips, and there's agreements there. The UAE is the newest member of BRICS. Is there a concern from the president that those chips and the technology will pass through to China, India, Russia, and Iran?
Part of going to the Middle East was to ensure that the United States, that this part of the region, our Gulf partners, know that the United States of America is there for them again, and that they should be investing in the United States, not in China. And these AI agreements, particularly the one the Secretary of Commerce signed in the UAE, has security guarantees to ensure that China is not getting the advantage, but the United States is getting the advantage when it comes to AI, and that the UAE and the U.S. are working hand in hand together to invest in this space. So read the agreements, there are security guarantees, and this was a great trip for the country, no doubt. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said today that Israel will take control of all of Gaza. Is that a goal that President Trump is comfortable with or that he supports?
I'll have to talk to the president about those comments as they just came, I believe, from the prime minister this morning, and I'll let him speak on that. The president has made it very clear he wants to see this conflict in the region end. He wants all hostages to be released. He was pleased that Eden Alexander was returned home safely to his loving family. The president spoke with Eden directly while we were traveling to the Middle East last week. As for the prime minister's comments, I'll let the president himself respond to those. Sure.
Two questions. One, how involved does the president intend to be directly in talking to House members about the bill over the next couple of weeks or the next week?
Sure. Well, over the weekend, the president was in direct conversation and communication with the Speaker of the House. He's been very involved. He always is. He's willing to pick up the phone when he is asked to. So he'll continue to be very engaged in this process with both House members and his friends on the Senate side as well.
And on former President Biden's cancer diagnosis, the president put out a very nice message on Truth Social. Has he talked to President Biden directly? Does he intend to call? What does he intend to say directly?
Not to my knowledge. I don't believe they have spoken, but I'm sure the president would be open to doing that. I spoke to him last night about the former president's cancer diagnosis, and the statement that he put out was the initial reaction he had with me on the phone as well. Peter.
Follow up on former President Biden. White House doctors may have missed the early stages of his prostate cancer. So is President Trump worried about the quality of care that presidents get here?
Not as far as President Trump is concerned. The White House physician we have here is phenomenal, and the team of physicians that take care of the president, particularly at Walter Reed Medical Center, are great. The president had his physical recently, as you know. He had perfect results. He's in very good shape. I think those of you who traveled to the Middle East with us last week can attest to the president's endurance. And by the way, I will add, we returned home from a very long and tiring trip last week. And on Saturday, where was the president? In the Oval Office working all day. He doesn't stop. He doesn't quit. He's in great health, and he trusts his physicians.
Two more things. Putin ghosted everybody at these peace talks last week. As President Trump phones him today to try to figure out an end to the Ukraine war, does he think that Putin is the good guy or the bad guy?
I'll let the president speak on that conversation later. He's made his feelings about both sides of this war quite clear throughout it. He wants to see it end.
And
Annie,
the
go
last
ahead.
one, what does President Trump mean when he says that Taylor Swift is no longer hot?
Look, he is speaking about Taylor Swift's political views and how perhaps it has impacted the support of the American public for her work. And I will leave it at that. Annie, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Carolyn. I'm just going back one more time to the White House Medical Office because there seems to be some question about this with regard to President Biden's screening. Can you say whether or not President Trump is screened for prostate cancer as part of his physical?
To the best of my understanding, he is, but we can certainly check in with the White House physician and go back and look at that physical report.
And then just one other question. Recently, Stephen Miller at the White House made some comments about considering suspending habeas corpus. And I'm curious if there's any update on how the White House is exploring that option to enact the president's agenda.
I don't have any update at this time, but I can check in with our Deputy Chief of Staff. Mary Margaret, go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Given the ongoing revelations about former presidents' mental acuity and how staff and media covered that up, especially with the release of this book, 2 days, I think, is there any interest in further scrutiny of Kevin O'Connor, the former president's position?
Mm-hmm. I'll let the president speak on that. I spoke to the president again about the former president's health diagnosis last night, and he wanted to extend his warmest wishes to the former president and his family. But as for any further action, I'll let the president speak on that first. Michelle.
Vice President Vance's meeting with Zelensky. Can you share any more information on that?
My understanding was it was a good meeting, a productive meeting, and we're grateful that the vice president did it and that he also went to the Pope's first Mass in Rome. I also have an update on that. The vice president passed along a letter to the Pope from the president and from the First Lady, extending their warm wishes and inviting them to the White House as soon as they possibly can come. Michelle.
On Iran, Steve Witkoff said yesterday that continued enrichment is a red line for the U.S. The Iranian foreign minister says that's going to continue no matter what. How committed is the U.S. to that red line, and what's the next step for the next round of talks?
We are 100% committed to that red line. The president, Special Envoy Witkoff, Secretary Rubio have made that incredibly clear, not just to the American public, but also in those discussions that Special Envoy Witkoff has had directly with the Iranians.
And the next round of talks?
I don't have an update for you, but we can get one. To the back row. Go ahead.
Thank you, Caroline. South Africa's president says he's going to come to the White House to meet with President Trump on Wednesday. What are the president's expectations for that trip? And South Africa's president recently said he believes the folks that have been resettled here recently are cowards running away from problems in South Africa. Does the White House have a response to that?
So I did see the South African president put out that statement. I want to confirm on our end with our Secretary of State and National Security Advisor, and we'll get back to you on that. Monica.
Thanks, Caroline. You mentioned the president and the first lady are signing the historic Take It Down Act this afternoon. I'm curious to know, what are some of the repercussions or consequences for these online platforms or perpetrators that won't comply with the act?
Well, what this bill does, it takes the initial step to ensure that prosecutors are able to take down, that's why it's called the Take It Down Act, platforms that are allowing this sexually explicit content on their platform. So it gives them more leeway to go after them as they see fit. But as for specific repercussions, I would defer you to the Department of Justice of how they plan to implement this bill once it is signed later today. Brian.
Yes, thank you. You said in your opening statement, you talked about this MAGA baby savings account. Exactly how would that work? Who would be eligible for it? I'm assuming women would be eligible for that.
Yes. So one of the provisions in the One Big Beautiful Bill, as I said, this is a very pro-family piece of legislation. Not only does it increase the child tax credit, but it also includes MAGA baby savings accounts for children that are born before January 1st, 2024, under 8 years old, U.S. citizens, and have at least one parent with a valid Social Security number. And when this tax provision becomes law, the child, if the parents seek to do this, will be set up with a savings account. Essentially, it's a 401k for a newborn baby, and child's relatives, their parents, can contribute up to $5,000 per year of after-tax dollars annually to that account. And then later in the baby's life, at age 25, savings account holders can withdraw up to the full balance of the account. Upon reaching 30, the account holders can access the full balance of the account for any purpose desired. So it's a great initiative for new parents, new mothers who want to set up this savings account for their children. Ouija.
Thank you, Caroline. President Trump and his top economic aides have repeatedly said that Americans will not pay the cost of tariffs. In fact, last week, Lutnick said people have to drop the, quote, silly arguments that consumers would pay the cost. But over the weekend, as you know, the president posted that Walmart should eat the tariffs and not charge the value customer anything. I'll be watching, and so will your customers. So does he acknowledge that if companies don't absorb the full cost, Americans will have to pay?
Well, first of all, the CEO of Walmart made those comments about the tariffs on an earnings call where CEOs, I believe, are legally obligated to give the most dire warnings and forecasts to their investors and stakeholders. The reality is the president has always maintained, Chinese producers will be absorbing the cost of these tariffs. And that is why China was so quick to hustle to the negotiating table with the United States of America. They need our markets, they need our consumers. And I would again point you to the inflation report that came out last week showing that inflation is declining in large part because energy prices are dropping across the board in this country because of the president's robust energy agenda that he has taken since January 20th. So the president is committed to ensuring that prices remain low for American consumers, and he maintains the position that foreign countries will absorb these tariffs.
What does he mean by I'll be watching Walmart?
He'll be watching, seeing what they're doing. Jennifer.
On the gift plane from Qatar, 3 things. Is there a timeline for the U.S. receiving that plane? Do you know how long it will take to retrofit the plane to presidential standards? And thirdly, has the intelligence community, security folks, have they weighed in on whether that plane can actually be secured to presidential standards?
I'm glad you brought up this question because I was watching the American press spew a lot of misinformation about the plane donation last week when we were abroad. Let's be very clear. The government of Qatar, the Qatari family, has offered to donate this plane to the United States Air Force, where that donation will be accepted according to all legal and ethical obligations. It will be retrofitted to the highest of standards by the Department of Defense and the United States Air Force. This plane is not a personal donation or a gift to the President of the United States. And everyone who wrote that last week should go and correct their stories because this is a donation to our country and to the United States Air Force. As for a timeline, because it is the United States Air Force that is accepting the plane, I would defer you to them for specifics because the president, frankly, has nothing to do with it. It's the Air Force's project to take on. Sure. Elizabeth.
Thanks so much, Caroline. Did the president call fiscal conservatives who are hesitant to vote for the big, beautiful bill? And if so, what did they say? What did he say?
I don't reveal the president's private discussions unless he gives me the liberty to, but he has been engaged in this process. He spoke to the Speaker of the House, and he will continue to make those phone calls if it's necessary for him. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline.
I'll go to both of you. Go ahead.
Thank you. Any updates on Greenland? Will the president be making any trips, and do we have any details you can share with us?
I don't have any future foreign trips to read out for you. We just returned home from one. But the president maintains the reasoning for Greenland's strategic purposes in the Arctic, and he continues to remain committed to the idea of obtaining Greenland in whatever means we can to advance our national security interests in the region. Sure.
Thank you, Caroline. I have a question. Was Lebanon part of the discussions during the Middle East tour? And did you meet with any Lebanese representatives?
To my knowledge, the president did not meet with any representatives from Lebanon, although he did talk about the election that they recently had there and how he hopes that Lebanon can come to a more peaceful place in their country and that we drive out Hezbollah, Iranian-backed Hezbollah proxies in Lebanon to ensure peace and prosperity in that country and also for the greater Middle Eastern region. And I would just add to that before I wrap up, because the president's call will begin in a few minutes. The president's historic tour to the Middle East last week truly reset our foreign policy agenda in that region. I think actually, in fact, the Washington Post had a headline, President Trump remakes U.S. foreign policy in the Middle East. And that's absolutely true. He took a courageous and bold step to lift sanctions on Syria. He strengthened our ties with our Gulf partners, and he put Iran into a very difficult position because the United States of America is back. And I will summarize the president's trip with an anecdote that I heard directly from a member of one of the foreign delegations. I asked him how hopeful their country was when they learned President Trump won the election. And he told me when President Trump won the election, it was like the lights turned on in a dark room. For the past 4 years to the rest of the world, America was dark. We were unresponsive. We did not pick up the phone. We did not return calls. All of that has changed under the leadership of this president. And I think the world saw that last week with this historic and wildly successful trip. And the work continues. The president will be speaking to President Putin at 10 a.m. and we'll have a readout for you after that call. And we'll see you in the Rose Garden at 3 o'clock. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Caroline.
Thank you, Caroline.
Towers. These are much needed changes. This is a very bold plan by the Department of Transportation. I think it's unfortunate that the previous administration sat on their hands and did nothing, but how grateful we are that we have a Department of Transportation and a secretary and a president who's willing to take bold action and change.
The personnel matter, Caroline. Could I ask?
Thanks, Caroline. Just going back to India, Pakistan, can we expect President Trump to get in touch personally with the leaders of those countries to try and de-escalate this situation?
If and when that happens, we will certainly let you know. Natalie.
Thanks, Caroline. Sure. I have a question about the Middle East trip. Will any of the president's family members, like including Don Jr., Eric, or Jared Kushner, be joining him?
I am not tracking any of the president's family members joining us at this time, but of course, the first family is welcome to come. I hope they would. They're great people, great to be around, but I'm not tracking them on the manifest.
And given that you noted he is a successful businessman, do you know if the president has any plans to meet with any of the folks involved with any of the family businesses over there, or see any of the sites that are going to be
Not to my knowledge, and let me just get to the premise of your question that both of you have raised. I think it's frankly ridiculous that anyone in this room would even suggest that President Trump is doing anything for his own benefit. He left a life of luxury and a life of running a very successful real estate empire for public service, not just once, but twice. And again, the American public reelected him back to this White House because they trust he acts in the best interest of our country and putting the American public first. This is a president who has actually lost money for being president of the United States. I don't remember these same type of questions being asked of my predecessor about a career politician who was clearly profiting off of this office. That is not what President Trump does. And this White House holds ourselves to the highest of ethical standards. Phil.
Thank you. There's this Reuters report that the U.S. is in talks with Israel about an American-led post-war administration in Gaza. Is that accurate? Are these talks ongoing?
We are in constant communication and dialogue with our counterparts and our allies and friends in Israel. Ron Dermer was here at the White House yesterday meeting with members of President Trump's team. As for the situation in Gaza, the president and his entire national security team have made it very clear we want to see the hostages released from Gaza. That is a priority for this administration. As for what that looks like, and even moving beyond that, I'm not going to get into the details of plans that frankly may or may not have even been proposed, but I can emphasize what the president holds closest in his heart right now, and that's the release of all of the hostages in Gaza.
And then there's been some conservative pushback to some of these salt tax, the salt tax cap. For instance, Majority Leader Steve Scalise said that bringing back the state and local tax deduction would essentially mean, quote, 45 states are subsidizing 5 states that have very high taxes imposed by leftist governors. Is he wrong? Is it fair to ask red Indiana to bail out blue New York?
Well, look, this is an ongoing discussion on the Hill. There's a lot of disagreement on Capitol Hill right now about the SALT tax proposal, and we will let them work it out. As for the tax provisions in the reconciliation bill, the priorities of this president, he has made them incredibly clear. No tax on tips for our hardworking service workers, no tax on Social Security for our well-deserving seniors who have worked their whole lives to pay into this system, no tax on overtime for hardworking Americans as well. And there's a plethora of other priorities the president wants to see in this bill. Anyone who opposes this bill will be opposing the largest tax cut in American history. They will be voting to raise taxes by the tune of $4 trillion on the middle class of this country. And we look forward to holding them accountable for that. Everyone on Capitol Hill on both sides of the aisle should be supportive of the president's tax priorities.
Follow up on that?
Go ahead. Sure. Go ahead, and then I'll go to your follow-up.
Thanks, Caroline. So I want to follow up on the Truth Social post. So the president saying 80% tariffs could come down. Just an announcement would be enough to lower those tariffs. Is that what he's looking for from the Chinese?
Well, that's not what the president said. He said that an 80% number may sound good to him, but again, he's in constant contact with our Secretary of Treasury, who will be leading his negotiations this weekend.
And historically, the Chinese have made the meeting itself a win. What does a win look like out of these meetings for the president this weekend?
A good deal for the American worker and the American people. Go ahead.
Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, back to the reconciliation bill. Can you just clarify the president's position, though, a little bit specifically on the tax issue? Because in his Truth Social post, he said this morning that he would accept even a tiny tax increase for the rich, but then says Republicans probably shouldn't do it, but I'm okay if they do it. So what is it that he wants? Does he want them to increase the tax rates?
The president wants tax cuts, the largest tax cuts in history. He wants to extend his historic tax cuts from 2017, and he wants to see all of the other tax priorities that I just laid out for you included in this bill as well. As for the policy proposal you're talking about, the president has said he himself personally would not mind paying a little bit more to help the poor and the middle class and the working class in this country. I think, frankly, that's a very honorable position. But again, these negotiations are ongoing on Capitol Hill, and the president will weigh in when he feels necessary.
Encourage them to have a higher bracket for top earners.
The president has made his personal position on this matter clear. Michael. The president's in constant communication with leaders on the Hill.
Ahead of the president's trip to the Middle East, he's mentioned he wants to rename the Persian Gulf the Gulf of Arabia. Iran is now saying that doing so will bring the wrath of all Iranians. Can you talk about the support that the Gulf of Arabia has in the region and why this is important to the president?
Well, first of all, the president has said he hasn't made a determination yet. That was in the news that you guys all asked him about it, and he said he wasn't quite sure. So he hasn't made a definitive decision on that yet.
And secondly, Caroline, the president has shown support for South African refugees that are coming to the United States next week. Can you talk about what these refugees are fleeing and why this is a priority for the administration?
Well, the president has actually signed an executive order on that matter. My office can get it back to you, Michael. But this group in South Africa has faced racial persecution. In fact, the government there has vowed to take away their farmland that they own. And so the president has talked significantly about this. As for further details on refugee claims and asylum claims, I would defer you to the State Department.
Can I follow up from that?
Go ahead. No, in front of you.
Thanks, sorry. Thank you, Caroline. Does the administration have any response to the news today that a federal judge has ordered the immediate release of Ramesa Ozturk from detention, and particularly his comments that the government submitted no evidence other than an op-ed that Ozturk wrote last year?
I will have to check in with the Department of Homeland Security on that particular case, but I think our overall feeling we've made quite clear that lower level judges should not be dictating the foreign policy of the United States, and we absolutely believe that the president and the Department of Homeland Security are well within their legal rights to deport illegal immigrants. As for visa revocations, the Secretary of State has the right to do that as well. It is a privilege, not a right, to come to this country on a visa. But I'll check in on the specific case. My office will get you details.
Sure. Caroline, yesterday the administration appears to have started dismantling the Consumer Product Safety Commission. This is the federal agency, an independent one that does recalls and is responsible for product safety. Does the administration not believe that it's important, to keep toys and cribs? I mean, you're a young mom, off of the product of the market.
It's a federal agency within which branch? It's the executive branch. Who's the head of the executive branch? The President of the United States. He has the right to fire people within the executive branch. It's a pretty simple answer. Francesca.
Thanks. One foreign policy one and then a domestic policy thing, if I could. As far as the president's trip goes next week, is he planning to meet with the FIFA president in either Saudi Arabia or Qatar? And if so, could you give us some more details about that?
The president has quite a few meetings with many people when he is there. We can certainly check at the itinerary and let you know if the FIFA president will be there next week. Frankly, I'm not quite sure, but we can certainly get you an answer. As you know, the president attended a FIFA task force meeting at the White House this week.
And on the domestic front, could you explain why the FEMA administrator was removed from his position this week?
And this is a personnel matter in regards to the Department of Homeland Security, but my understanding is that this individual testified saying something that was contrary to what the president believes in the goals of this administration in regards to FEMA policy. And so, of course, we want to make sure that people in every position are advancing the administration's goals. But as for specifics, I defer you to the Department of Homeland Security. We leave it up to our great cabinet secretaries when it comes to personnel matters. Sure, in the back.
Thank you. Aid hasn't gone into Gaza in 10 weeks. Israel says that this is a policy to pressure Hamas in the negotiations, in the ceasefire negotiations. Is this a policy that this administration supports?
The president answered this week. He said that he wants to ensure that aid can get into Gaza, but we have to do it in a responsible way to ensure it doesn't end up in the hands of terrorists. So this is something the administration is actively working on. And when we have a policy to announce on this definitively, we can certainly let you know.
Can you talk about this effort for the U.S. to take over the distribution of aid in Gaza, to exclude Israel? But also international organizations said this effort militarizes aid.
I would reject that characterization by whatever groups you are citing. Kelly.
Caroline, thank you. I want to get back to the First Lady Melania Trump dealing with foster children. That's an important component in American life to see what happens to the future of our children, particularly in foster care. Can you explain the significance of this development between the First Lady and the housing and urban development?
Yes, absolutely. It's millions of dollars that will go into a program that helps these children transition out of foster care to have productive and positive lives. And I'd like to share a personal story since you asked if I may. I hope the First Lady won't mind. I was at an event in Florida last year, and I was approached by a gentleman who was a foster dad, and he had taken in, I think it was 6 or 7 foster children. And he spoke to me. He had recognized me in my work for President Trump's campaign at the time. And the little boy who was with him talked about the personal relationship that he had with First Lady Melania Trump. And the conversation she had with him and how she really encouraged him to be the best that he could be during her first term here at the White House, and how even after she and President Trump left the White House, she kept in very close touch with this young foster child. It was a touching moment that I will never forget, and it speaks to the heart of this First Lady and the great work that she is doing for foster children. And this is certainly a very big announcement that I know our Secretary of Housing and Urban Development is in particular very excited about, and we can certainly get you all the details on that program. John.
Thanks a lot, Caroline. I want to ask you about the trade deal that the president announced yesterday with the UK as it relates to the auto sector.
Sure.
The trade group that represents the big three here in the US believes that it may put the big three automakers at a competitive disadvantage. What the trade group says is that it will now be cheaper to import a UK vehicle with very little American content than a USMCA compliant vehicle imported from Mexico or Canada with just 50% American content. What's your response to that criticism coming from this trade group?
Well, first of all, let's be clear about what the deal does. It sets a 10% rate on auto imports for the first 100 cars that are imported into the United States. 100,000 cars, thank you. That would be very few cars. 100,000 cars imported from the United Kingdom. After 100,000 vehicles, it goes back up to a 25% tariff. And as for our U.S. auto manufacturers, our auto industry, the president wants to put them on the best pedestal to compete. And by the way, if they produce vehicles right here in the United States of America, they will face no tariff at all. I would argue of any industry, the president has spent more time talking to and listening to the concerns of our auto industry here at home. He hears them. He believes in them. He wants to see them produce their vehicles here in the United States of America. This is a good deal for them too.
Is this a model for European and Asian vehicles as well, what we see coming out of the UK trade deal with the US?
Look, all of these deals are going to be tailor-made. The president has said that from the beginning. It's very apropos that the first trade deal was announced between the United States and the United Kingdom, one of our oldest and greatest allies. But each country has unique concerns and challenges in terms of American industry. We need to open up markets in every single country. And obviously the needs are unique. So our trade team is looking at each country and the advantages that we can pursue for American industries and American workers. Sure.
Happy early Mother's Day. Oh, thank you. The president said yesterday that he would be speaking with Zelensky shortly. Did that call happen yesterday, or do we expect that to happen in the near term?
The call happened yesterday. President Zelensky called the president to tell him that the critical minerals deal had passed the parliament in Ukraine. I talked to the president about that call. He said it was very good and productive. And of course, the critical minerals deal is great for Ukraine, but also, of course, for the United States of America and our taxpayers here. It was a good call. And they also spoke about, of course, the ceasefire that the president proposed, the 30-day ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine, which we know Europe is on board with, and we hope both countries will agree to.
So next week, do we expect President Putin, is there any chance that he could meet with Trump while he's in the region?
The president answered this yesterday. Not going to happen.
Question on ceasefire. Has he got any reaction from Zelensky or Putin on the proposal for ceasefire? Is he satisfied by the reaction to that proposal?
Not to my knowledge, but certainly if there is reaction and updates, I'm sure you'll hear directly from the president.
Question, the president fired the Librarian of Congress. Why did he choose to do that?
We felt she did not fit the needs of the American people. There were quite concerning things that she had done at the Library of Congress in the pursuit of DEI and putting inappropriate books in the library for children. And we don't believe that she was serving the interests of the American taxpayer well. So she has been removed from her position, and the president is well within his rights to do that. John.
Thank you, Caroline. Happy Mother's Day as well.
Thank you.
President Trump ran on delivering the biggest tax cut in history, got over 70 million votes. Right now, you got a handful of obstructionists in the Republican conference that are saying they're not going to go along with his tax cut package. You just said those that don't will be held accountable. What is your description of being held accountable?
Well, look, I think they'll be held accountable by the voters in their respective districts if they choose to vote for a tax hike to the tune of $4 trillion, which would raise taxes to thousands of dollars per household in this country. The president has great political instincts. That's why he's back in the Oval Office, and Capitol Hill should follow his lead. As for the president, speaking of him, he will be signing executive orders later this afternoon. We are happy to provide more information on those executive orders if you wish. Thank you for the Mother's Day wishes, and happy Mother's Day to all of the moms in the room. And don't forget to call your mom this Sunday. We'll see you guys later. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, Caroline.
Good to see you bright and early on this Monday morning. As you know, this week marks the first 100 days of the Trump presidency. And President Trump's first 100 days have undoubtedly been the most monumental and historic of any administration in American history. President Trump has already delivered on hundreds of promises he made to the American people, and we will continue to talk about all of them throughout this week. Tomorrow, I will host a press briefing at this same time, bright and early again, to highlight the Trump administration's economic accomplishments with our Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. And tomorrow night, President Trump will travel to Michigan to discuss all that he has achieved on behalf of the American people. On Wednesday, the president will host an open press cabinet meeting where each cabinet member will discuss their success thus far and their plans for the future. Today, we kick off 100-day week with a focus on the president's historic effort to secure our southern border. Later this afternoon, President Trump will sign an executive order on law and order and another executive order on sanctuary cities. The first EO will strengthen and unleash America's law enforcement